Seeing a quorum of voting members, I call the May 20th regular board meeting to order. Treasurer Wagner, would you please call the attendance roll for us?
Mr. Craig? Mr. Lindy?
Yes.
Ms. Mapp?
Yes.
Dr. Moffitt?
Yes.
Mr. Morosky?
Here.
Vice President Weinberg?
Yes.
President Bolton?
Thank you. And Chairman Craig is attending, representing the board and conferring the diplomas at the School for the Creative and Performing Arts. That's why he's absent today. Thank you, Treasurer Wagner. Entertain a motion and a second to approve the revised May 20th meeting agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Treasurer Wagner?
Mr. Lindy?
Yes.
Ms. Mapp?
Yes.
Dr. Moffitt?
Yes.
Mr. Morosky?
Yes.
Vice President Weinberg?
Yes.
President Bolton?
Yes. Vice President Weinberg, would you please explain to our audience as to how they might be able to explain, I think, signing up for virtual speaking of the public? I think we do that early on and then we'll remind them.
I don't have my lovely script in front of me, but I think I'll
Well,
make
we
it
can
work.
wait. That'll be okay.
Yes. So for those who are online, there will be an opportunity to obviously sign up for the chat in the online version here. And if you could please just make sure that you are signed up, we will, once we get to the portion of the meeting for public hearing, we will be able to have you comment.
Thank you. Just wanted to give them the lead time for that. And now Vice President Weinberg, would you please kind of announce our next exciting topic that we have moved to the front of our meeting? And I think you
Yes.
have to introduce the person that's going to be doing most of the work. Go ahead, Vice President Weinberg. Introduce Mr. Hard.
I will be introducing Mr. Harden. I'm going to read his bio really quick. It says, Josh Harden, our district athletics manager, is finishing his 12th year in CPS and his 8th year leading the district's athletic department. Prior to his current role, Josh served as an assistant athletic director at his alma mater, Walnut Hills High School. A proud husband and father of 3 girls, Josh is grateful to have 2 daughters attending Pleasant Ridge Montessori and his youngest daughter born just a month ago. Josh's peers throughout the state selected him for the Southwest Ohio Athletic Directors Association Sportsmanship, Ethics, and Integrity Award for his work this year. So let's welcome to the podium. Well, you're already there. Let's welcome Josh Harden, Athletics Manager for CPS Schools. And he will be conducting our Athletes of the Year recognition. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Board President Bolton, swoop. And Vice President Weinberg. Vice President Weinberg, Sursum ad sumum, right? And to the board, thank you for having us today. Treasurer Wagner, thank you. We appreciate you and all the hard work of the Treasurer's Department through this time, as well as all of the leadership team. Big shout out and thank you to my supervisor, Chief Shauna Murphy. Let's give it up for Chief Shauna Murphy. I know past board member Carolyn Jones was a huge advocate for athletics, was at our All-Star game yesterday. I know she kind of left before I had the opportunity to thank her, but many, many years of her coming to so many athletic events and being supportive. So just wanted to thank her for all of that. Now, next slide. So we will go through just a couple thank yous and then a few introductions of our team and touch on some athletic updates. And then of course, the main events, we've got some of our student athletes here to be recognized. So really just want to thank all the staff throughout the district for a great year this past year, 2023-24. Central office staff worked so hard collaborating with our school staff as well. So big shout out to them. Our school staff on the athletic side is our school athletic directors as well as our coaches. Would like to give it up for our athletic directors and coaches. And of course, we couldn't do what we do without our many community partners that are supportive of CPS athletics. So thank you to our community partners, our parents and student supporters that are there at so many games and different events throughout the year. And of course, our students that have worked through a very hard year, ups and downs, many celebrations, but they battled through adversity and had a great year. So we love our student athletes and we'll be recognizing them today. Before I pass it off to some of my team members, we've got a lot to be proud of in CPS athletics. Over these past 8 years, we've seen increases in participation numbers. We've seen growth in sports. We've been innovative in adding esports and other programs throughout the district. Year after year, over these past few years, have increased the number of grants and donations that we've been able to bring in. Last year, we were at roughly 150,000 and we grew to about 200,000 this year and have plans and goals to do that again through grants and donations and continue in the future. Elementary athletics, 7 years ago, when I stepped in the role 8 years ago, 7 years ago, we added an elementary athletics division and really wanted to revitalize that program and build a foundation for our elementary students. And so we brought on Brent Langhorn first year as an intern, built in some camps and clinics. And then the next year, we started adding teams and programs. And I'm super excited to present Brent Langhorn as our elementary athletics coordinator to share a little bit more about elementary athletics. Brent?
Thank you, Josh. Thank you to the board for having us here today. Next slide, please. So it was another great year for elementary athletics in the district. We had a variety of sport offerings each season and collaborated with community partners to continue to bridge the gap between elementary, junior high, and high school athletics. During the fall season, we had ABC Girls and Boys Soccer in partnership with Activities Beyond the Classroom and FC Cincinnati, flag football, and cross country for youth led by CPS alum and Hall of Famer Reggie McAfee. In the winter, we had girls and boys basketball. I want to shout out Be Greater With, a nonprofit that donated some funds for us to get uniforms for some of our teams. We also had Brain Bowl in the winter, which is the elementary version of academic quiz team. And then we also piloted a pickleball program as pickleball continues to increase in popularity in partnership with Ollie Otter Enterprises and Cincinnati Tennis Foundation. Also shout out to Larry Blundred for his generous donation to pilot this program in CPS this year. And then in the spring, we had volleyball, t-ball in partnership with the Reds Community Fund, track and field, 26-mile and pig abilities in partnership with the Flying Pig Marathon, and then ABC Tennis in partnership with Activities Beyond the Classroom. In addition to our seasonal sport offerings, we have supported various elementary sport camps and events throughout the district, which have increased participation and engagement in other ways. This includes Woodward Cheer Clinic, CPS Youth Wrestling Program in partnership with CPS High School and Wrestling Coaches, Spring Break Camp in partnership with CRC, Walkout Kids at an FC Cincinnati soccer game, Community Tuesdays with the Bengals, CRC Youth Sports Summer Camps, and CPS Summer Youth Baseball Camp in partnership with CPS High School and baseball coaches. Each year since the inception of elementary athletics programming via the district office, we have seen an increase in participation numbers. We have also created a new system this school year to collect elementary athletics data via Google Sheets. We look forward to continued efficiency and improvement with that process as we move forward. Lastly, we know that growth could not be possible without our leaders in the school buildings. I would like to recognize all of our elementary staff and coaches in the district. There would be no programming without them, and we greatly appreciate their efforts and all they do for CPS students. Thank you.
Let's give it up for Brent Langhorn, elementary athletics. Yeah, we're going to get all those board members out on that pickleball court pretty soon. I know you guys want to be out there, but just super excited about elementary athletics and the growth. I know we have maybe just Morawski and Bolton that have been around the start of implementing elementary athletics, and I'm hopeful that you guys have seen a growth in all these different programs. I know you guys come out and see the track meets and the different things, so super excited about elementary athletics and that growth there. Next slide. And now we've got the foundation of elementary athletics that builds up into our junior high and high school. Mark Herman comes to us from Walnut Hills High School. He was an assistant athletics director there for a few years and then came over, and this is his second year as the junior high and high school athletic coordinator. Mark Herman's going to share a little bit more about junior high and high school athletics. Mark?
Thank you, Josh. Thank you, everyone. So another great year for junior high and high school athletics. We love to highlight and promote our student athletes. That's really what it is that we're here for. But so a lot of great opportunities that we were able to initiate this year. At our K-8 schools, we work very closely with 6 athletic coordinators that are either, resource coordinators or teachers in the building that, just have a love for the students in the building and just have a passion for sports and what it can do for students. So at each of those schools, AMI, AWL, Hartwell, Roselawn, Roberts, and Sailor Park, they traditionally always have volleyball, girls and boys basketball, and then track and field as well. This year, we are able to, in the fall season, implement flag football. Boys in the junior high at those schools did not have the most opportunity. So to be able to introduce junior high flag football with some participation from some girls as well was a great opportunity, and looking forward to the continued growth of flag football as well. In the spring, we introduced soccer at each of those schools as well, and have had a great time at AMI and Hartwell CRC, and another opportunity for those K-8 students to participate in soccer. So looking forward to continuing to work with those K-8 schools and increase the opportunities for those students. We hosted our second annual CPS Cheer Showcase at Walnut Hills this year. This is always a great event, one of my favorite 8 a.m. Days to wake up and get to feel the energy of our cheerleaders in the district. It's always just an awesome time. And next year, we're looking forward to continued growth there for each of our cheer student athletes as well. CPS Esports, we hosted our second annual showcase at the UC Innovation Hub. This year, we had 6 teams from Aiken, Gamble, Euler, Riverview East, West High, and Walnut Hills, and are seeing increased engagement and interest from those from a few other schools as well that we'll look to implement esports into next year. The CPS Basketball All-Star Showcase, we're happy to be back at UC Fifth Third Arena this year for the showcase. Another great event in which that event we were able to raise $15,000 to donate back to CPS Project Connect. And in addition to that, we're able to begin a $5,000 trust fund for late DJ Dowdy, Taft Athletic Director, who passed away this year, for his 2 children as well. And I did just want to share a quote from a student athlete from the Basketball All-Star Showcase. What made this memory meaningful was not just the game itself, but the camaraderie and sportsmanship displayed by all players. Despite being rivals during the regular season, we came together as a team, supporting and pushing each other to excel. It was a reminder of the power of sports to bring people together regardless of backgrounds. And that was a quote from Amarion Beckley, who was actually recently named our Chris Nelms Scholarship Award winner. And just yesterday, we hosted our Baseball and Softball All-Star Showcase. It is the 7th annual showcase that we've hosted. A big thank you to the Reds Community Fund and all that they do for the continued support to grow the game in Cincinnati. So thank you to the Reds Community Fund. We hosted 70 baseball and softball student athletes out there yesterday. And at that time, we again recognized one male and 1 female baseball and softball student athlete to earn the Chris Nelms Scholarship Award. And last bullet point there is our golf outing. The golf outing this year is the Dave Durker Golf Outing on July 14th. Throughout that golf outing, we will, celebrate and recognize a lot of our student athletes and community partners. And this year, we will again recognize 2 student athletes with the Dave Durker Scholarship Award, 1 male and 1 female student athlete. So invite everybody out to the CPS golf outing on July 14th. Rob Wilson will be there. So on July 11th, he'll probably start saying something about his shoulder or his back that are hurting. Again, thank you all for having us here today to shine some light on our student athletes. Thank you.
Fantastic, Mark. And between Mark and Brent, I heard activities beyond the classroom, University of Cincinnati, Cincinnati Bengals, FC Cincinnati, Reds Community Fund, Be Greater With. So many community partners that we have that allow us to come together and make the impact that we've been able to make. So another shout out to those great community partners. Next slide, please. Mark referenced the Chris Nelms Scholarship. Chris Nelms, past board member, community advocate, and individual that revitalized baseball in the inner city through the RBI program. A few years ago, we named the baseball softball all-star game in his honor. And last year was our first year that we were able to raise funds through that game and award $2,000 to a male and female in the name of Chris Nelms Scholarship. And we did the same thing yesterday, as Mark referenced. Thank you, board member, Dr. Kareem Moffitt, who came out and was able to represent the board there. And let's give it up for Rhonda Borden and Omarion Beckley. Those two student athletes were recognized yesterday at the game. They received their big old check that you see there, that $2,000. We're excited for them as they head off onto their next steps. Next slide, please. The Dave Durker Scholarship. This scholarship was started in 2018. We did that through our golf outing. We started a CPS athletics golf outing that Mark was referencing, that Rob always loses at, and Dan loses pretty often as well. But we have a good time, and ultimately we raise a lot of money for our student athletes. So since 2018, we've been able to present 11 student athletes and award over $20,000 for the Dave Durker Scholarship Fund. Can we clap it up for that? Dave Durker was my predecessor and in the role that I'm in for 18 years. Dave did pass last month. Board member Bolton was at the service and representing the board. Thank you for being there. And we've talked a lot with the family. We recognize Dave at the baseball softball all-star game yesterday. Charlie Frank and the Reds Community Fund made a plaque similar to the plaque they made for Chris Nelms that stands at the Red Youth Academy. And we'll also be recognizing Dave and his family at the golf outing on July 14th. You see the 22-23 student athletes that have received the scholarship. The scholarship winners for 23-24 will be announced at the golf outing on July 14th. How do you become a Dave Durker Scholar? Well, you got to be the best of the best. So our Student Athlete of the Month winners, we select by nomination of coaches, athletic directors. We select a student that has excelled in the classroom, in the community, on their respective field of play. All Student Athlete of the Month winners are eligible when they become a senior for the Dave Durker Scholarship. So we're super excited that we have a few representatives here today that will be coming up and shaking the board members' hands and representing all of our Scholar Athlete of the Month winners. I believe we have 4 of our group here that will be coming down. You can see all of our Scholar Athlete of the Month winners on the pamphlet that had been provided. We'll ask at this time the board members come on up and we'll get our student athletes lined up for the handshaking and picture taking. Next slide, please. Oh, look at that. All right, student athletes, when I call your name, you're going to come up and shake your hands and then stop for a picture and then shake hands all the way through and then head to the other side. First up, one of our September winners, Selvin Velasquez. Selvin? Selvin comes to us from Aiken High School. Swoop. Selvin is a senior cross-country and soccer player who will be heading to Cincinnati State. Let's get up for Selvin. Also, September winner, Sierra Swain. Sierra comes to us from Western Hills High School. She is a senior volleyball player and will be going to the Ohio State University. All right, we got a few other student athletes that I'm going to read off their names that aren't here today, but a big shout out to them, and a good majority of them will be recognized on the ball field at Great American Ballpark tomorrow. Very excited for that. Lorenzo Engelman from Hughes High School. Nakia Spicer from Riverview East. Nair Bray from Woodward. Brent Thompson from Gamble. Chomp, chomp. Next slide, please. Sorry, next slide, please. December winners. Tia Palmer from Hughes, another big red. David Clark from Euler. And this was our first ever esports athlete of the month winner. Our January winners, we've got Raquel Thompson, Spencer. Jameer Whitfield from SCPA. February winners, Hoyt Noble from Walnut Hills High School. And we've got some gymnastics out there representing Western Hills High School together for Karma Pele. Western Hills High School junior gymnast. Next slide, please. Next slide. Our March winners, Jordan Buchanan, Taft High School. Rihanna Cloud, Woodward High School. And April, Ali Martinez from Euler High School. Representing Gamble, Kendrick Shear Jr. Kendrick is a Gamble Montessori Gator Chomp Chomp, senior track and field. And finally, May, we've got Lamyra Dinkins from Withrow High School. And Ethan Ernst from Clark High School. All right, board members, I think you're allowed to sit back down. I do want to take a quick second. The student athletes that came out today, as well as all of our Scholar Athlete of the Month winners, have been recognized and nominated by great coaches, athletic administrators, and I know some of them are here today. I would ask them to stand. All the coaches representing Cincinnati Public Schools, any CPS coaches, please stand. This great group of mentors and role models give so much to our district and their extra time for our student athletes. So super grateful for them, as well as any of the family members that are here that are loving and supportive of our student athletes. Any of those family members, please stand and be recognized. All right, we appreciate all the support. We'll have our Student Athlete of the Month winners over in a room after this for a dinner and let you guys get on with the rest of your meeting. But we really appreciate all that you guys do to support us in athletics. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Any questions or comments before we lose the AD? Member Moffett?
I will just share. I enjoyed myself yesterday, as I always do. I enjoyed myself at the basketball all-star game. You all put on a great show for our students, athletes. And I'm so impressed that athletics is not just simply the physical. It's also the brain ball. It's also now, I didn't even know we had gymnastics going on. So yeah, congratulations. And thank you for the stuff that additionally matters for our students. I want to make sure that we say thank you for that to you and your team.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
Oh, one last thing. I know dinner is over there, but you can always feel free to bring some back over here.
You guys let me know. Let me know. We got you. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. It's always wonderful to celebrate the successes and the accomplishments of our young people and their families and the staff that helps them along the way. But also tonight, besides that celebration and commendation that we've just experienced, as many of you know in the audience and those of you viewing the meeting tonight, we've also had in this great graduation season, also a great tragedy. And to share her thoughts and to also lead us ultimately in a moment of silence, I've asked Member Moffett, Dr. Moffett, because both Dr. Moffett and also General Counsel Hoyne represented the district at the graduation. And also Member Moffett also has a long-term connection with Tiger Country, with Withrow. So Member Moffett, if you'll share your thoughts and lead us.
So just want to offer that I did have the pleasure of conferring the diplomas at the Withrow graduation. And I did not know this young man personally, but he was giving out hugs to Mr. Gray. And he looked at me, he's really tall, and he said, I'm giving out hugs too. And he gave me a hug. And it is always difficult when we lose our students. This is no different. I learned yesterday at the Withrow balloon release ceremony that this young man had 113 IQ. And his teachers shared how he was able to turn around himself academically and would like to ask for just a moment of silence as we join the Withrow Tiger community in honoring the life of Lamont Wiggins, who is on our screen. To his family and his friends, we share in this time of grief and are with you. We are CPS. So just join me in a moment of silence. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Moffett. Tonight, as we proceed with now everything in clear perspective and priority, we're going to go to our old business. And under old business, we have board updates. There are no board updates to report tonight. And then we will now move on to another item on old business. And And those are the two items A and B, budget suggestions, recommendations for review, draft 3, which is a document that was produced and shared some weeks ago. You'll see that Dr. Little is listed on the agenda, but he too is at the SCPA graduation. So I think we have Treasurer Wagner is going to have to do double duty. And we appreciate the treasurer answering the call. And that is to go through those budget suggestions, that document, as well as brief this board as this board needs to know what we really need to figure out, which is ahead of us regarding the gap and closing of the gap. So Treasurer Wagner, as you see fit, proceed.
Thank you, President Bolton, and good evening, everyone,
Thank
board
you.
members and the public. So just go ahead and flip to the next slide. So I thought I would, after last week's conversation, just kind of start off with a little bit of background and history to kind of explain how the budget usually gets built. So we set the budget target during the November 5-year forecast. So you remember, you're going to hear the May forecast later this evening by Kevin. But once we do the forecast, the number that's circled there is our revenue for next year. And it's just the general fund revenue, so it doesn't include any state and federal grants. The general fund budget target in November was set at 606.5 because we had committed to having a balanced budget. Then in January, the reappraisal property taxes were released, and in February, we revised the budget target with an increase in about 17 million in revenues, so that we were able to increase our budget target to 723.7. During that time, go ahead, Flip. So then in January, we had a workshop with the board on a Saturday morning, January 27th, and I shared this document as a starting point for conversations about what we were going to fund, how we were going to address the ESSER cliff, and what we weren't going to fund anymore. So we started at the time with the current year budget, general fund budget at 609.9, and then this is in millions of dollars. And if we added at the time, we had estimated that 86.4 of expenses that were in ESSER were going to continue as recurring costs. The resource coordinators and nurses, some IT, capital leases, and so custodial supplies. Then on top of that, if we do nothing else, our budget goes up because of negotiated step increases in our collective bargaining agreements. And with benefits, we estimated that at the time at 7.1 for the general fund. And then in addition to that, we have a separate agreement with AFSCME to maintain $20 an hour. And so that would add we were phasing it over a 3-year period. So that would add a 2.8 million. I also included an estimate as the ad hoc committee was kind of finalizing their conversations and estimating that we might need to do some borrowing through a COPS issue, which stands for a certificate of participation. It's just a financing tool where you act as if you're having an operating lease. So if we did a $70 million borrowing, we would have to have a $5 million payment annually. So that would be added. So that just takes, without any other new initiatives, that would take the cost of what we're currently doing, plus the recurring stuff, up to 711 million. And at the time, our November target was at 606.5. So we had about $100 million that we had to make decisions about. Without the COPS, it was 99.7. So next slide. So then there was a bunch of roundtables, a bunch of budget presentations, a lot of conversation about what to cut and what not to cut. So here's a summary of the ESSER. So we started in January of the 86.4 and what we thought were going to be recurring costs. The board approved through those conversations a $26.7 million reductions. If you click that link and you have copies in front of you, I brought hard copies, or Mike did. Thank you, Mike. If you click that link, it actually goes through and and it actually tells you the date of when you approve that budget reduction as a board. I don't know that you necessarily want to go over each individual line. Let me get through this. If you want to go back and reveal details, we can. So after that, of course, when we start having conversations about cutting positions and closing the gap, They went back and said, well, maybe some of these recurring costs aren't as big as they thought they were going to be. And so they've refined those for an additional $12 million in reductions. One of those was we took summer scholars out of ESSER and put it in title for this year. So that was a kind of an easy reduction. So as of May 15th, we have now 47.6 in recurring ESSER costs. As of today. Okay, so next slide. So I did the same summary for general funds. So the report you have in front of you shows how you approved the $20 million in reductions in general fund. It's on a separate document. It's in the PowerPoint. So if you're online, you can click the link and look at it. So next slide. Then we received the board's budget suggestions and recommendations that was representative of a bunch of brainstorming, community input, survey input, board recommendations. And that's what we're calling, I guess, the Heinz 57 document now. So if you'll click on that link, Rob, if you don't mind. We just simply took that Word document and added to the best of our understanding what those costs would be. The first section was just kind of general conversations. And so, you know, I wouldn't have an estimate of what it would sell the Ed Center. So the first section of this is for further discussion. But if you scroll down a little bit, there was, thank you, making it for my over 60 age eyes. So the next section were about increases in initiatives that people had ideas or it has a request. And so to the best of our ability, when we went in and costed out those things. So as a result, if you scroll up, or I'm sorry, down the other way, I always get it backwards. Those increases, we don't have it summarized on here. You remember what the increases cost? It was a lot. 26 million, I think, or more. But those aren't in the budget necessarily, unless it says it's been completed already. So then if you keep scrolling to the reductions, the ones that are highlighted in green were the ones where I went in May and said we'd already included these in the budget, so they can't be repetitive cuts. And then we costed out the rest. So you can read those at your leisure, and we can talk about if there are any of those that we want to tackle as a reduction to get to the balanced budget. So anyway, I just wanted to show you that screen that we did go in and put the cost factors where we could. There was a couple items that we weren't quite clear on what it meant, so we might have to discuss it further. Okay, so you want to flip back to the PowerPoint, Rob? Thank you. So then there was a lot of questions and confusion about title funds. So this year we were able to add Clark Montessori to our Title I, but they will be a restricted school where they do their planning year, and then next year they can be a school-wide. So if you go to the next slide. This year, all the schools received this decision trees on how to add staff to their schools using Title I funds that was based on the data, the results of their school. So, and if you're an elementary school, every school was required to have a reading specialist because of the strategic goal on primary reading. And then step 2, they were allowed, if your enrollment, English language learner enrollment would represent 20% of your population, you received an ELL coordinator. And then you can pick a math or another teaching position if you had money left over. And then you went on to step 3. If you had still money left over, you could add more things to it. The next slide shows you the K-12 schools. So they started with a reading specialist, and then they can choose between the graduation counselor, the AP of culture, or their attendance school social worker. That was a change from last year. Last year, if their attendance rate was X, then they got a school social worker out of that money. So now this year they were to have a little bit more choice and freedom according to their school needs. And then the next slide shows you the high school rules. So they started with the graduation counselor, and then they could choose between the AP of culture, the social worker, or the reading specialist. And then if they had funds left over, they could get an ELL coordinator as long as their enrollment was 20% of their population. So a little bit more freedom this year to choose. I do know that I think 2 schools decided not to go with their APs of culture, and they made other decisions. Next slide. So this is just a representative of what their salaries are. Some of the reading and math specialists are a little bit more expensive. They tend to be more seasoned people, so they've been around for a while. And then so it's just a representative of what those positions would cost the district because you're paying their salary and then the related benefits. Next slide. So this is what was chosen. So for an example, an explanation, the first line on there was a reading math specialist. We have 29.5 positions, but only 28 of them were split funded into title. So somebody found another source of funds to finish out the difference. And we're spending $3 million on math specialists. Same thing with reading specialists. We have 69.5, but only 61.9 are actually charged to Title I for $7.5 million. APs of culture, the counselor, ELL coordinator. And then off to the side, there are some other positions that were added in, or portions of positions. For example, our fixed asset supervisor, 15% of his salary gets charged to Title I because Title I represents a lot of purchases of fixed assets. So next slide. Things that aren't yet included in the budget was the expansion of career tech programming. And when I went back, I did realize it was, I think, $3.7 million on the Heinz 57 document. So I do have a cost for that. The redistricting contract we think was about $250,000 to $300,000 with Matt Cropper. I don't know that we've identified any new fiscal year 25 ad hoc costs yet. And then if we decide to go with the COPS to help fund some of those initiatives, the $5 million isn't in the budget yet. Next slide. So as of actions last week and then resetting for this week, we went through, Mike and Dr. Little went in and verified that all the approved reductions were in fact not in AlaView, our budget building software, just to make sure that nobody accidentally snuck something in or forgot to take it out. And then we did verify that all school budgets have now been submitted. And so two things that we have to do is we develop a budget task force, and I'll explain that in just a second. And then starting tomorrow, we're going to be doing line by line school central office budget reviews. Very grueling, but it's the only way I can figure out to just really get to the basics and the compliance related spends or the strategic spends that we want to do. So next slide. So over the weekend, starting Friday evening, I started making phone calls. I invited all the union leads, and they've all graciously accepted to join us tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Whoever you name as interim superintendent and as chief, and then myself, we're going to get together and just talk about how do we forge a path forward to get to a balanced budget. Go back and look at some of the recommendations that weren't chosen to be reductions. Go back through contracts that could possibly be shaved down or put on hold for a year, activities that can be put on hold for a year, or if there's any other positions that we need to not fund. So tomorrow morning, we'll be over in Launch Ed. And so thank you all for agreeing to spend some time with us. I'm looking forward to it. Next slide. So right after that meeting, we're going to start with our budget review session. So each ELT member and their budget managers have been signing up for 45-minute segments to start this very grueling process. We're only going to get through about half the budgets tomorrow. And so we're going to have to pick another day to continue, but we'll figure that out tomorrow. But it's a high priority moving forward. We're running out of time to do a balanced budget by June 30. So I'm also preparing the staff for the possibility of doing a temporary appropriation. Next slide. So this is where we are today. The general fund extract as of this morning was at 655.3. The target, if you recall, and you'll see it again in the November forecast, is 627.3. So that leaves us with a gap to close of 31 million. Now, having said that, 5.6 of that 31 is from the Cincinnati Preschool Promise and expansion prior year carryover. So it's not part of the this year's financial resources. It's prior year savings. Because of COVID, we underspent those budgets. So in the master agreement, we've agreed to start spending that money down. So that $5.5 million is reduced off the 31.6. Does this make sense? I'm seeing eyes glaze over. So the real debt, as of tonight, the real task that we have to figure out is 26 million. So everything that's in Allaview, which is our budget software, includes all the agreed upon the reductions you've approved in public setting, the ESSER reductions, the partial inclusion of the board, across the board reductions. So remember several weeks ago, we had a big gap. The decision was made to have everybody do a 5.9% across a central office, not schools. 5.9%, but not everybody could do that. In fact, some budgets actually went up. So instead of being reduced, they went up, and we have to go and figure out why and see what we can do about that. We also haven't added the COLA in yet because that's also being funded by a separate source of funds. And then it does include all the school allocations. So next slide. So what I'm trying to show here is a visual of we started this process with the assumption of that we were going to start with current year budget 609.9. So that assumption is becomes that nothing changes in the schools. And we know that the school budgets went up by $8.5 million because we added some things. And so if the total pie stays the same, it puts more and more pressure to squeeze the central office down. And so we've been seeing that for the last couple of years. So this just is a visual depiction that the balance between schools and central office is changing. Central office is being reduced. Next slide. This explains why the school budgets went up. So student projections are up by 1,200 from prior year. And so there are more staff in the buildings, or projected to be in the buildings. We added, forgot my cheat sheet. Hold on. 13 autism and MD classrooms this year to the budget. That's costing about $3 million to the general fund. And that was a pre-COLA estimate. So when we add the 2% COLA, those costs are going to go up. We added 3 preschool disabilities classrooms, and we added 5 ESL teachers because the ESL population is growing and there's a formula to support those students. So those 3 things alone added $3 million to the budget. Step increases are disproportionately in the school budgets because there are central office. There's not a whole lot of central office people that are on the step schedule, salary schedule. Most of those positions reside in the schools. So we estimated that the steps and the ASME agreement would cost the general fund $9.9 million. And so that's showing more than the schools than in the central office. And then we put the parking costs into the schools where we typically have been paying for virtual and SCPA, their parking costs. So that actually adds to the schools case out of the central office. Next slide. So here's an example of the changes in positions. Assistant principals, we added 5, 24 classroom teachers. I believe the ESL teachers are in that, and 2 clerical, 3 counselors went down, nap aides, PR and music changes, paraprofessionals, principals, security, and some of those were because of the vacant positions that we agreed to reduce. If you'll recall, school social workers, the special education unit teachers, those were the MD and preschool disabilities classrooms. And then the biggest change is the super subs that were in ESSER. That was one of a large reduction in ESSER. We created the super subs during COVID because we didn't want daily subs traveling from building to building and possibly carrying germs across buildings. So we put permanent building subs in each building, but knowing that we couldn't support that long term because they're very costly. So we did increase the daily subline in the schools to kind of offset the reduction in ESSER. Next slide. So that's as much as I could gather together since last Wednesday. I hope over the next couple days with getting the budget task force together and doing the departmental budgets analysis that we'll be able to give you an update at the next public meeting. And we'll certainly keep, one recommendation was instead of waiting until the next meeting is to give you daily updates to the best of my ability. It might be every other day, but I'll keep you as updated as I can.
I think that would be appreciated. Do members have questions, comments, points of clarification? Vice President?
I don't really have a question. I just wanted to thank you, Treasurer Wagner, for really being transparent and clarifying. So we have a gap of 26 million and it's not the 13 million or whatever we were told a couple weeks ago. So it's $26 million, correct?
It is. So it wasn't that you were being misinformed. It was when we started the practice, or we started it from last year and started taking away versus building the budget from the ground up. There's always things that come in where people really want to get something, a new project accomplished or something. So in the 31 years that I've been with this district, the budget ask is always much greater than the budget target. That we go through this every year. And so this is not unusual. It's more painful this year because of the cliff and we've gotten used to some of those resources. And it's going to continue to be painful. But we are committed to going back to a balanced budget. And because, as you'll see in Kevin's presentation, our cash, we were very cash rich a couple of years ago. We had a very healthy cash balance. And because of the strategic plan and the change in transitions and superintendency, we spent more money than we typically take in every year, which chewed into that savings. So we just need to get back on track and be conservative with our funds.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other members? Member Moffett?
So I appreciate you trying to say that. Can you go back to slide 17 for me, please? I appreciate the way that you're trying to say that, Jen. But I do want to point out, we spent 4 months on this budget talking about the gap, excuse me. Let me be clear. And I was under the impression it was 6 million. And then I was under the impression there was a mistake and it was $18 million mistake. And then it was $13 million net. And now it's $26 million. And it is May the 20th.
So let me explain the mistake because it was a totally innocent mistake. So when we started building the budget at 609, we made an assumption. There was some negative contingencies that got us to 609. We were balancing last year's budget. One of the biggest ones was we had $18 million negative vacancies. So we know that we budget at average salary across the schools, but we know we run constant vacancies. There's turnover, then hard to fill positions. And so several years ago, we decided to start using historical data to figure out, well, how much are we save in salaries because of vacancies and turnovers. And so that was part of the 609. So when we started building the budget with 609 and going backwards, we included in our estimates a vacancy savings for the new year, but that was really a duplicate. And so that was the mistake that was the duplicate that was mentioned a couple of Mondays ago when we were going back through line by line and I noticed that it was in the spreadsheet. So completely innocent error.
I'm not casting dispersions. I'm just sharing that the timeline is that we are now on the 20th of May at having to cut $26 million. Is that a fair understanding?
That's correct. And you know, we are here where we usually are in March, but because the whole process started several months late.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Member Matt?
Thank you, President Bolton. Treasurer Wagner, thank you for the presentation. Just trying to make sure that I am clear. Can you, in a bullet point, state what the contributing factors are to the 26 million? So if I'm understanding, it's the budgets that are that have increased year over year that you've outlined here, as well as maybe the mistake that occurred and the preschool promise. Are those the contributing factors or what are the other areas?
So the contributing factors in the difficulty in balancing the budget, and as a new board member, you may not have heard me say this, but I used to put up a slide, it's called the ESSER cliff slide, because there were things in that we were paying an ESSER, like the nursing contract, because when we started the nursing contract, it was paid for by another grant. And then when Governor DeWine created the student wellness grant, which was outside the general fund, we moved the nursing contract there. So pre-COVID, we were spending $1.7 million on nursing services. During COVID, that grew to almost 9 million, a little bit over 8. And from day one, for the last 4 years, I've been saying we have to do, we cannot sustain that level of nursing. And I love the nurses. This is not a judgment statement. We just can't sustain that level of nursing services at that cost. So the nursing services, resource coordinators, the same thing happened. They started out as a 21st century grant. And when that dried up, they went into the student wellness grant. When that dried up, we moved into ESSER. And now they're hitting the general fund. So we have $4.8 million in nurses that's being added to the general budget. The cost of resource coordinators, I can't remember exactly what that is right now. The Promise Center was in ESSER for a while, and that's come back to the budget. I can, and the next time I do this, I'll actually create a whole list for you. But so that's the biggest contributing item, in addition to inflation, salary increases. And you're right, the Cincinnati Preschool Promise, the preschool expansion effort has grown beyond our annual revenue cycle. So we have a $48 million levy coming up in November 25. 15 million was set aside to expand preschool that is shared by Cincinnati Preschool Promise and Cincinnati Public Schools. There's too many C's and P's there. Together, our budgets are $20 million, but we only have annual revenue of 15 million. So we're using prior year underspending, but that's going to run out next year. So when we get to the levy, we're going to have to decide we're either going to increase the levy or go find another revenue source or scale back, because otherwise we'll be taking money to fund preschool from the K-12 buckets. So that's another contributing factor, is that the expansion of preschool is awesome. It's great, but it's costing more money than we have.
Okay, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Mr. Lindy.
Thank you, President Bolton. Treasurer, thank you very much for the presentation. It was very, very helpful. At this point, do you think, I know that we're not quite there yet, but do you anticipate recommending we do a 90-day appropriation, or do you recommend we get to a balanced budget for the end of June?
But I always will recommend a balanced budget before June. If my bad budget task force friends, if we can get accomplished between now and the next board meeting, we could get there. But we only have a couple board meetings left in the year before we get to that June 20. I think June 23rd is your last board meeting. So I'm hoping for the best, for preparing for Plan B.
And I appreciate that. I'll just share from my perspective, this particular year, the 90-day spending appropriation seems like a particularly challenging option because we can't spend for 90 days at the rate at which we've been spending. Because if we do, we will make the gap we have to close in the remaining 9 months of the year worse. Am I missing something there?
So then you're right. We can't spend at the rate we've always been spending. And so one of the things I'm probably going to recommend is that we put a hold on, freeze all hires at this point and freeze all new contracts. Even recurring contracts that aren't like electricity and utilities, we need to just pause until we can figure out what we can afford to do. The 90-day appropriation is a little bit of a confusion for people. It's not 90 days of funds. It's we have 90 days to finish the budget. So we can do a half-year appropriation to make sure that we have enough funds to get the school year started. But we have to be very careful about how we're spending that money. You're right. I track it every day to make sure that we're not going to overspend that appropriation.
That's really helpful. And I think I've been guilty of this too, of talking about a 90-day appropriation as though it were an extension. When it's not an extension, because if we spend at that rate, at the old rate for those 3 months, we're digging a deeper hole for the remaining 9.
Right.
So I appreciate that. I may have more to say later on. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? I'd like to ask one before others ask some more. Can we go back to the I think it's 17, where you talk about the having the preschool piece, less the prior cash carryover. Could you explain that to me again?
Sure. So, we have a $15 million set aside in the levy annually to fund the expansion of preschool. And that is shared by the Preschool Promise Cincinnati Preschool Promise and Cincinnati Public Schools for our expansion efforts. Our budgets have grown because they've been successful at recruiting more students. That we're serving over 2,000 preschool. 1,000 of our students are gaining assistance from the tuition assistance line budget. I think Preschool Promise is up to over almost 900 students. So we recently, so together our budgets collectively based on need was about $20 million this year. And so since we only have $15 million to spend a year, we had to dip into prior years underspending to fully fund those budgets. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that answers my question. Also in the preschool piece, we know, and you know, and maybe the audience needs to know if they don't already, our half of 15 million does not fund our preschools.
Correct. But this is last dollar in. And so we're spending about $30 million, I think, on preschool. Don't quote me on that, please.
Well, that's the point. We are beginning to get give the message that the $15 million that we, out of this wonderful $48 million trust and faith, if you will, from the voters, that 15 million takes care of all of our preschool classes, and it takes care of all of the private providers that are also part of Preschool Promise. Preschool is costing us, and probably some of the private providers, a significant amount more than the $15 million that we are getting by that one levy.
So yes, you're right. The $15 million, and we were going to explain this in the financial town hall, but it got canceled due to tornado warnings.
Right.
But the $15 million is last dollar in. So with Cincinnati Public Schools, we use money from Head Start, Title I. There's an early childhood elementary grant, early childhood. And then we have parents who pay tuition, and then our half of the $15 million. Preschool CPP doesn't have the same kind of grants, but they do have some. And so it's always last dollar in. So all those financial resources get exhausted first, then we add the general fund as last dollar in.
So we have this carryover left over because we've, had a wonderful amount initially assembled, so to speak, collected from the beginning as we were growing. So this 5.6 that you're talking about, that's going to help us with this, how much we have to close the gap. Those dollars, won't they then be required to be spent on preschool?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
it isn't that they're going to help close the gap because they're going out to a number of different items. It's that part of the preschool expenditure in the next year is going to be that. But those dollars are going to be dedicated to preschool.
Yeah, so part of the 623 million, I'm sorry, part of the 655 million is the full cost of both of our preschool expansions, which is $21 million-ish. But we're setting the budget target based on next year's revenues. And so we have to take the increase out of
revenue.
prior year revenues.
And that's revenue. Okay.
So I'm not using it to close the gap, but I just want to let you know that the 31 million is really smaller because of the preschool money.
Gotcha. Thank you. And then whatever we still have to close the gap on, are you anticipating that any of this gap can be closed and the new budget can be built without personnel costs or cuts?
That's doubtful. I'm sorry to say that I think we're going to have to go with reductions. But
okay,
we need to go through everything that's been
Saying
recommended and
it's
revisited.
doubtful is not the same as saying it's going to have to be done.
I don't have enough information
Enough
yet.
information. And when might we know when we might have enough information after you go through the task force and stuff?
I think at the end of this week and early next week, we'll have a much better
Thank
idea.
you. I think that's helpful to me. Other questions, comments, Mr. Member Mapp. There's too many M's here. They all fell together in my mouth.
No problem. Treasurer Wagner, you talked about potentially having a freeze until we are able to identify, where we are with the budget. There are recommendations for today. What is your perspective? Are you expecting that we freeze any type of recommendations that we have? Or are we okay to be able to move forward with certain recommendations that are on today's agenda?
So as painful as it might be, my recommendation would be just to delay the new hires. Unless it's for like a compliance position that we would get in trouble if we didn't have it replaced. Like a superintendent. So, or any special needs compliance related stuff, but I would say any brand new hire, I mean, it doesn't make sense to hire today and then have to turn around and they would be the first people out the door under a RIF anyway, a reduction in force, because it's based on seniority. So let's just pause for a week or two and then figure that out.
Okay, I guess my question is, were these not accounted for before the recommendations were made? Like,
So they're part of the school, but well, I don't have them in front of me, but I know there's some assistant principals that are in the recommendations
Correct.
for tonight. So they were part of the school budget based on the formula for the increase in 1,200 students and there was a change in the formula last year that caused us to increase our staff. So, so they are in the budget. They're in that $655 million.
okay, but if I'm understanding you correctly, what you're communicating is that we don't have a accurate read on where we are financially to be able to make these recommendations for the promotions for ABs.
My recommendation is not to hire any new positions until we balance the budget.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, comments from anybody regarding one last one from me, if I can. As we look at the budget that we have to build, is it possible for administration to put in on a list what any new initiatives or new things that we would be doing? Or are we building just a budget of where we are and repeating? Obviously, we can't repeat this year because we have to spend less. So as we are spending less, not only what we're cutting, but also what we are not doing from a standpoint of initiatives.
We can build that as we go, yes.
Okay,
As that becomes clearer.
that would be helpful, I think. Any other questions, comments? All right, thank you, Treasurer Wagner. I think that takes,
There was one more.
one over, oh, good, sorry.
I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out how to formulate this. I just know that we have approved in the previous meetings certain things that did not even specifically directly affect our district. And we've approved spending for things pertaining to the community, but now as it pertains to our district directly, we're now saying that we're not in a position of funding certain positions or funding certain entities that directly align with our overall community. I guess I'm just having a hard time understanding how we're being fiscally responsible with the funds that we do have.
But without speaking specifics, it's hard to answer that question, but it could be that they were related to a different fund and not in the general fund. Or they were preparing for summer school or something that's in the current year.
Okay.
You're welcome.
You good? All right. Thank you very much. That takes care of both of those items. Do any members have any, I think this is where we are, any acknowledgements or announcements for tonight? Dr. Moffett, would you please present the retirements?
Sure thing. So we've got 2 certificated retirees. Please pardon me if I mispronounce your name. I'm super excited for you, so I know they're getting out of here. Christine Jarman, who is a teacher at Midway, and Elizabeth Thole, who is a teacher at Western Hills University High School. Congratulations. And that's it. So congratulations on your retirement. We wish you well and we'll always welcome you back. Thank you. Can we clap it up?
All right. Thank you very much. Kudos or suggestions of happiness?
Yes, I just have one quick kudos that I would like to give. Yesterday afternoon, I got the opportunity to speak in front of over 90 student athletes at Walnut Hills High School. They did a celebration for these wonderful seniors who are graduating class of 2024. And I was proud to be able to not only represent the board, but also to speak to the students, to encourage them and just to wish them well on their future endeavors. So I just wanted to give a huge kudos and shout out to all of those student athletes, their parents, and the families and friends that came out to support them. So let's give them a big round of applause.
Thank you very much. Member Moffett.
For this weekend review, I was able to attend the Adopt a Class presentation for the seventh graders at Schroeder, who adopt a class with the CEO Sonia Foltz. They are doing some awesome things. The seventh graders were at Digital Futures at UC. I don't have pictures, but if they send some, I will absolutely share. They got a great keynote and they are really, really rocking it. So congratulations on a great event to Ms. James and the Adopt a Class who has sponsored the seventh graders from Schroeder.
Thank you very much. Any other kudos or acknowledge? Yes. Member Matt.
Yes, I would like to just extend, kudos to Pleasant Hill Academy and Principal McDowell and the students, the sixth grade students that are being promoted to high school. So they were excited. I was able to speak to the students as well as the parents, and it was just a great experience. And also to Hughes STEM High School, which I had the pleasure of attending their graduation. It was just truly a celebration. And so it was an amazing experience, well organized. I love the band. It was just amazing. And then lastly, I just want to say happy birthday, if I can, to my baby boy, Makai. It is his birthday today, and he is 5 years old. And so I had the chance to celebrate a little bit earlier today at Field Day and at school with him. But I just wanted to be able to say that again.
Appreciate it. Any other kudos or acknowledgements or suggestions? If not, Madam Vice President, the chair is yours to lead us
Alright.
through the hearing of the public.
Perfect. Yes, thank you, President Bolton. We are now at the item on our agenda for hearing of the public. Each speaker will have 2 minutes to speak and address comments to the presiding officer. If you are online, once a request to speak has been granted, you will be invited to enter. You should click on the camera icon to go interactive, provide your name, your affiliation to the district, your school, community, your topic, and your contact information if you would like a response to any questions that you might have. The request is consistent with board protocol, and we appreciate your help. In the unusual event that someone is not willing to follow this, we reserve the right to end that person's time. Again, each person will have 2 minutes to speak. When the timer goes off, your time is up. And please refrain from discussing any personnel items. And after speaking, if you're online, you'll briefly see the welcome screen again as you transition back to the live stream of the meeting. Finally, we ask that your public commentary be respectful of all listeners. And I'm going to ask Mr. Wilson, do we have any online callers? And if we do, how many do we have?
Madam Vice Chair, we have 2 speakers online today.
Okay, before we begin with those 2 speakers, I do want to just say for those that are here in person, once I call your name down, if you could please come and have a seat here at the podium until we are done with our online callers. First up, we will have Parker Brown, Marcia Patel, Stefan Pryor, and then I will hold off on the last speaker. And I think for this particular Parker Brown, we're going to have you coming down up to the podium just as a speaker. And I don't know if we want to have everyone else sitting. Do we have enough chairs? Can everyone fit? Do we need to scoot on down? Okay, perfectly. All right, we will start with our online callers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Our first speaker today online will be Ozzy Davis. Ozzy, please go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
Thanks, Rob. Good evening, everybody. Madam Chair. Before I comment on last week's actions, let me say that the athletic department is quite thrilling. And I want to, really recognize Athletic Director Harden and the work that the athletic department is doing. It's probably the work that I'm most familiar with in the district. And it's something that's very, very positive and something we have to hold on to during these turbulent times. I've got 2 comments about last week's actions that I want to, share with you all. There was great disappointment. My disappointment is greater in the fact that there was no public comment in between the time the unions asked you to ask the superintendent to leave and the time you asked the superintendent to leave. The lack of public comment, that's a serious faux pas. That should not have happened. And each board member should require yourself to think about, there was no public comment. Several of you heard from me, so I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about public comment. And when you have 6 unions pressing you to do something, there should be some community involvement before you make your decision, especially those of you that are so community involved. That was very disappointing. As we go forward, I don't know who you all are choosing for the interim superintendent, but from those that I even heard you're considering, ain't no chumps. They're not going to be kissing the butt of the union. So there still will be concerns. I want my friends, Kareem, Mary, Eve, I want y'all to know, I'm still with Cincinnati Public Schools. It's in my blood. I might not agree with your trajectory of how we move our district forward.
For your words. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker.
Thank you. Our next speaker is going to be Jennifer Myrie, NAACP. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Thank you. Good evening, Board President Bolton and board members. My name is Jennifer Myrie. I chair the Education Committee for the Cincinnati NAACP, and Joe Mallory is our president. Our thoughts and prayers are with CPS students and staff during these difficult times of loss and transition. The resignation of Superintendent Ironetta Wright from Cincinnati Public Schools is unfortunate and causes concern for our students and families. When Ms. Wright was hired, she was welcomed and supported by the Cincinnati NAACP. We committed to Ms. Wright's leadership by supporting the 2022 levy. We agreed at that time with Ms. Wright that the Cincinnati NAACP and Cincinnati Public Schools would engage in regularly about the state of Black students and educators. Although we could depend on the superintendent to engage with individual members of our organization, the agreed upon data-driven conversations about Black students and staff never occurred. We openly requested this collaboration during regular school board meetings and in writing to no avail. It was clear that CPS Black students and staff were not a priority. The NAACP of Cincinnati remains steadfast in our commitment to improve the educational experiences of Black students and staff of CPS. We are demanding that the school board demonstrate its commitment to equity, particularly in the Black community during this transition to new district leadership. First, the 2023-2024 test scores will be available to the public within the next few months. There is an opportunity for collaboration between Cincinnati Public Schools and the NAACP to commence in July before students return to school. We are requesting that CPS staff share student performance data and strategies with the community so that we can prepare our students in schools for the upcoming school year. Second, the general body of the NAACP meets monthly with the community. We are requesting CPS leadership staff commit to attending our membership meeting. There will be an opportunity for CPS leaders to share openly about the progress and planning that is specific to Black students and staff of CPS. Lastly, we are requesting that the NAACP have a seat on the selection committee for the next superintendent. We must be involved in the selection of the next superintendent to ensure that the school board's commitment to equity is realized and supported in the Black community. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Rob, can I ask for the noise or the little timer sound that's going to go off? Can it be just a little bit louder so that I can hear it, please? Okay, thank you so much. All right, our next speaker will be Parker Brown.
Board President Bolton, Vice President Weinberg, and board members. We represent the Office of Marketing and Communications and a combined more than 87 years of service to CPS under several different superintendents and department leaders. The allegations recently made against Chief of Marketing and Communications Mark Sherwood are not a fair or accurate depiction of his character or leadership. He is a leader of exceptional integrity, recognizing the inherent value in each individual regardless of race, age, or gender. Mark exemplifies compassion, fairness, dedication, and a relentless work ethic, consistently going above and beyond in his role. He promotes a culture of accountability and recognition, encouraging and empowering us to own our successes while he shoulders the setbacks. Simply put, he's everything you want in a boss. In addition to sharing countless stories about our schools daily, we have produced award-winning marketing and communications campaigns and projects such as the CPS Cincy Experience, Back to School Festival, All Schools Guide, Parker's Playground, and Black Male Educator and EL Educator video series. Events and products that would not have been possible without Mark's vision and leadership. Despite disruptive dynamics in the department, he has remained steadfast and focused on the work that serves our students and families. It's important to recognize that Mark's alignment with the superintendent's directives is a testament to his professionalism, commitment to his role, and service to CPS students. In regard to a recent article, none of us were approached by this reporter about allegations against Mark to verify if the claims are an accurate representation of our department. The defamation of Mark has unjustly tarnished our department's remarkable achievements and relationships. As direct contributors to the district's success stories through our roles, we implore you to come to us to learn genuine insights about Mark's leadership and allow us to continue exceptional work for the students, families, and staff of CPS under Mark's direction. We appreciate your thoughtful consideration of our firsthand experiences and perspectives regarding Mark's leadership. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker, Marcia.
Good evening to all of you. I come tonight not representing any of the several organizations to which I belong. I come as a parent of 3 CPS graduates, grandparent of 2 current CPS students, and as a taxpaying citizen of this school district. Once again, we find ourselves in need of a change leader for our district. Yes, change is still needed. Going back to business as usual or how it's always been is not an option for our children or for those responsible for their education and well-being in our schools. Going back means a return to the same unacceptable academic outcomes, the same low expectations of our students and their parents, the same systemic inequities that hinder our children of color the most, and the same unproductive friction between the same factions of stakeholders that should be working together on behalf of our kids. As your constituent, I challenge you as a board to do a better job of leading and coaching our next change leader. It will require some changes on your part. I challenge you to assess your own contributions, personally and collectively, that has led to this unfortunate situation and humbly course correct with a swiftness. I challenge you to hire an experienced, wise, compassionate servant change leader that you're willing to coach. This time, do keep your eyes on the results, but don't ignore the debris field that change always brings. On behalf of our children and families, I implore you to demonstrate the servant leadership needed in the next superintendent and that we expect from you, our elected officials. We deserve it and we are watching. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker, Stefan. And then our last speaker will be Julie Sellers.
Good evening. Thank God I made it today. Thank God to see y'all again. Miss Ardenetta Wright, I liked her. My prayers for her and her family. She got that bag and left. I would have did the same too, because y'all, voted down on her, but it's okay. My condolences go out to the young man, Mr. Wiggins. I hope y'all name a park after him. The picnic where he happened at, got killed at. Name something after him. Please do that. Man, the new Dr. Alicia and Shonda Murphy, they both should team up. Team up. Make it be 2 superintendents so y'all can't fire both of them then. That's what you need to do. Get 2 of them now. And I understand on TV, it ain't about color because y'all got 2 Black women in here going to be the next, both of them superintendents, because we can't keep having that. We got to get something done. I heard her reading off that budget over there, and some money looked like it got missing. We got to find that money where it went to. At least get the teachers a raise or something. They need a raise because they're dealing with a lot of stuff at schools. You need to do that with some of that money, Miss Eaton Bolton. Guarantee that. But what we need to do is make sure y'all get 2 of them superintendents in, 2 of them. They can watch each other back just in case y'all try to get rid of them. So we can't have that. We got to stop that. We got rid of Miss Laura Mitchell. She got rid of herself. That's what the president over there told me, that she got rid of her own self. But we can't keep having that, y'all. We got to get something done, Miss Moppin. We had to. See, we keep playing the games and the students getting all upset about stuff. She did a great job. What's his name? Ben, right? He spoke highly of her. He said, y'all making a wrong mistake. And y'all did, but she got that bag. She left. Miss Eaton Bolton, I saw you was turning your head, smirking and laughing, feeling good. You can't be doing that. I saw that up there. You can't be doing that. You gotta, hold that the time.
Thank you so much.
I love you
Mr.
guys.
Blair.
And you can do about it, all right?
Our next speaker is Julie Sellers.
Good evening. Good evening, members of the board. I just have a couple of words to say this evening, but Cincinnati Public Schools is the foundation of our community. Our community, is it working? Okay. Our community has always been there with us. In your search for the new decision for the new interim superintendent, you must identify someone who is trusted and empowers CPS staff to do the jobs that they were hired to do. We need someone who follows board policy and will honor local and minority vendors and contractors as much as possible. This person needs to be someone who respects the dignity of work in CPS. The next superintendent will be tasked with the challenge of repairing and rebuilding relationships with partners within CPS and the Cincinnati region. A successful candidate will be someone who can manage those relationships while putting children first. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We are now at the end of our hearing of the public, and I will pass it along to President Bolton. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Vice President. Thanks for everyone participating. I believe that the next item is again, Treasurer Wagner is going to introduce the presentation for our 5-year forecast.
Yes, I'd like to introduce to you Mr. Kevin Ashley. He's been with us for
Almost 5.
I was gonna say 5 years. And he really does the bulk of the work on the forecast. Just to give you a little bit of background, every district in the state of Ohio is required to file 2 5-year forecasts a year, once in November and once in May. And it's strictly general fund. And take it away.
She stole some of my thunder, of course, but the only other thing I had noted there too is the actual forecast and the notes that will get filed with ODEW are included in the treasurer's report. So once you approve the treasurer's report, we will get those filed with ODE this week. First slide just kind of talks about some of the factors that could impact the forecast as we go forward. So some of these are reminders, some of them are just some new items that we just wanted to bring to your attention. So there's been some chatter, really in December was around the time there was a lot of discussion from the legislature. As it related to the unprecedented reappraisal values that went up. So there was some discussion about directing county auditors to change the way they implement that. Currently, the law requires them to look at the recent year sales, which caused higher values to come out. One suggestion was to average 3 years of sales, which would have lowered the reappraisal. So just letting you know that that's a proposal that was mentioned. Another thing is the 20 mil floor in related to property tax values and tax rates. That only affects school districts. So there was some discussion about possibly eliminating that. Both of those factors would negatively impact the revenues of the district. So again, just making you aware of those. Another thing that is difficult about forecasting for 5 years, the current year plus 4 additional years, is that it does touch 3 different state biennial budgets. So as you know, every 2 years, the state legislature and the governor go through that budget building process. And inevitably, we see changes every 2 years. Sometimes every year, they'll make changes as well. So again, be diligent in keeping track of those types of things that come from those discussions. The Ohio Fair School Funding Plan, it was envisioned as a 6-year implementation plan. The legislature has fulfilled that commitment we're going into the 4th year of that implementation. We anticipate they'll continue the phase-ins for the last 2 years of that period. But again, so we've anticipated that in the forecast, but again, we're just not, they aren't set in stone or in law at this point. We've included inflationary rates for things that we know we'll see in increases over the next year, actually the next 5 years, just anticipating that. As Jen mentioned earlier in her presentations, the board commitment to maintaining expenditures within the revenue projections is going to be a key factor in maintaining a cash balance throughout this forecast period. She also mentioned the CLIF plan. Another thing that's built into the forecast is enrollment projections versus what the actual projections will be over this period, including categorical enrollments such as special education, disadvantaged pupil impact aid, and gifted, ELA, all of those types of things. Also then, obviously, collective bargaining agreement terms will impact the forecast as well. Next slide. Just one of the things we wanted to point out here, I know there was a lot of discussion about increased property tax revenue as a result of the reappraisal. And we are seeing that, anticipating that in the first couple years of the forecast. But one of the things we wanted to point out is that the state funding plan actually calculates a local capacity, which is the district's ability to levy taxes, essentially. And as the district's local capacity increases, that results in a larger burden on local taxpayers. And so the way that they calculate that is based on a 3-year average. So incrementally, as our values are increased over 3 years, it'll go up to that higher value. We will continue to see state revenue as a result of that decrease to some extent. Within the plan, because of the planned Fair School Funding Plan increases, that will offset some of that decrease in state funding that we anticipate due to local capacity. Another factor that's actually affecting our funding this year and may continue is statewide. There is a disadvantaged pupil impact aid, which was formerly known as economically disadvantaged, that indexes our district versus all the other districts in the state. As we move up or down that list, it impacts our funding related to those students. Next slide is just this is kind of a high-level summary of the prior year, current year, and the next 4 years. The one anomaly on here is the tax anticipation notes, the short-term borrowing that was done in December and then repaid in March. So you'll see in the current year, it shows us revenue and then offsetting expense. It looks like an increase, but essentially it was made up by the property tax revenue that we received. The other key thing on this slide is the yellow fund balance amounts. Those are the lines that Ohio Department of Education and Workforce look at to determine if the district is demonstrating a fiscal distress. So if any of those three were negative at the end of those fiscal years, they would be looking for some sort of plan to rectify that. Next slide. This is just a high-level view of the base cost per pupil. It's calculated at $8,097. Of that, 42.8% comes from state funding, while the additional 57.2% is a burden on the local taxpayers and businesses as well. Next slide is the data that's included for district educated enrollment. This is what our formula is based on, excluding the categoricals. You'll see the first 5 years listed here are the actual, and then we have a projection for the current year and the additional years. One of the things that we talk a lot about, and we've kind of got moved past that a little bit, but the state used to do pass-through funding for charter schools. And so what this graph did was actually restate what that would have been using the current district educated model. And so it's restating that for those first couple years, just so you can see that. But this does also exclude preschool students. As we talked about before, we do receive funding for special education related to preschool students, but we do not receive state funding for regular ed preschool students. Next slide is just a high-level view of revenue analysis. One of the key things I wanted to note here, we do have the $75 million tax anticipation note included. And so that kind of skews these percentages a little bit, but in the footnote, you'll see that taxes represent about 57% of our total revenue, and about 31% represents state funding. Next slide is this is a total revenues overview for the last 3 years, this year and the next 4. I mentioned at finance, I like this slide because it kind of shows the slope of, we are anticipating some revenue increase. You'll see the same thing with expenditures. A couple anomalies pointing out here back in 21, that pass-through funding I mentioned, where we received the money and then we turned around and it went right back to charter school, et cetera. So that explains why that was a little bit higher bar at the time. For the current year, again, if you take the $75 million out, you'll see that slope is more consistent. The last 2 columns, the light blue, that represents the renewal levies. The Department of Education and Workforce, as part of this process, requires us to indicate what those amounts are and how they would impact our revenue if we did not receive the renewal of those levies. The other key thing I'll mention there, about 46.5 is a full year. And that how that relates to the $48 million that we talked about earlier is about a 97% collection rate. It's kind of a historic rate that they use for calculating in the forecast. And the half year before that is due to the timing of the levy being on a calendar year versus our fiscal year. Next slide is high level of tax and property tax rollbacks. The key thing, again, I'll mention here are the renewals in the light blue. We could forecast new levies at this point, or not for this period, but those would show up here as well if we did. Next slide is state aid and state foundation. Gives you a breakdown of unrestricted versus restricted. The restricted includes those categorical things that we mentioned. There's a base cost calculation for student wellness that goes directly into the general fund. DPIA, English language learners, gifted education, and career tech education.
So can I just make a statement?
Sure.
So referring to the student wellness money now being in the general fund, it used to be a separate grant. In the last year of the full grant, we received $12 million from student wellness. And because it's now in the formula, it gets reduced by the state share. So we're now that instead of getting 12 million, we're getting 3.
Thank you. So the next slide is a big revenue category of all other revenue. So there's a lot of things that go into this. The blue consists of things such as the tax increment financing, the TIF revenue, the Community Reinvestment Act, CRA revenues, Medicaid reimbursements, and then also E-rate is in all other. The gray section relates to advances in. So this is the return of the advance. So at the end of the year, one of the things we'll ask the board to approve is advances from the general fund to cover grants that are in a negative, waiting on reimbursement from the Department of Education, from the state. And so you'll see in 23, that number was much higher, 19.4 million. We anticipate that being lower this year. At that time, we were waiting on a pretty significant ESSER reimbursement from the state. It seems as if we're on track to only need to request a lesser amount this time, but just wanted to point that out because that's one of the more significant lines of revenue. The next slide, switching to expenditures, similar to what I mentioned before, if you take the tax anticipation notes out of the all other category, personnel costs would represent about 73% of our total expenditures and purchase services about 19%. Next slide. This is the expenditure overview. Again, you can see that state pass-through funding in the first year. And then in this year, taking out the 75, you can see that traditional slope. Next slide is a forecast summary. One of the things, you have the full forecast, you have a copy of that. So certainly you can let us know if you have any questions on that. But one of the key things that we have done is allowed expenditures to grow to the amount of projected revenue. So you'll see in 25 through 28, the expenditure and the revenue bars are the same. I don't know what color that is. Pink is the renewal levy piece that shows up in the last 2 years.
I like the new colors.
Okay, good. The $55.6 million would be the cash balance equivalent to what we project we could end this year at and carry forward through the forecast period. Next slide. So one of the things we added here, the software that we use for forecasting does a calculation based on the forecast and based on the number of calendar days to represent the cash on hand of the district at the end of the fiscal year. You'll see last year we ended with using that calculation approximately 42 days of cash for the general fund. This year we're looking at approximately 29 or 30 days. The treasurer's working on a policy related to cash balance, and we'll be talking about that with finance and I'm sure with the board as well. The standard recommendation is more like at least 60 days. So that's, another consideration going forward is maintaining a healthy cash balance to avoid any unexpected issues. So that's all I have. If there's any questions.
Do members have questions or need points of clarification from either Mr. Ashley or the treasurer regarding the 5-year forecast? Mr. Morosky.
Thank you, President Bolton. Thank you, Mr. Ashley. And thank you, Treasurer Wagner, and your whole team. Every time we get a 5-year forecast, I always have a similar comment. And since we have cameras here, which aren't normally here, when we're talking about our 5-year forecast, I can't help myself. And so you referenced the undue burden of property tax, correct, on the people in our district. That undue burden is unconstitutional, is it not?
It has been ruled as such.
4 times, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I might not be the sharpest tool in the shed, but I do know how to interpret stories. I did it for 10 years in a classroom, and always like to take this opportunity to remind people that if they don't like it, and I don't know that anybody does, that undue burden, that the best way to get rid of it is to vote for different people in Columbus. So please, as a reminder, please support the levies because you've seen it up here, is that we need it. Also, the other thing about this presentation that always strikes me more starkly, I think, than other ones is how impossible y'all's job is. And during this crazy budget crisis that we kind of find ourselves in, it's a good reminder for me because none of these decisions have been super easy. And the ones that we're about to face are probably going to be the most difficult ones. Just for whatever it's worth. I mean, for me, centering kids in all of this is going, and I think we try to do that all the time. But there's going to have to be a pretty firm line drawn at times, I think. And I guess that's where my line will be. So thanks y'all for your hard work.
Thank you, Mr. Morosky. Other questions, comments, points of clarification regarding the 5-year forecast, either from Mr. Ashley or the treasurer? Wow, that's pretty exciting. Must be the new colors.
Right.
I would, if I could ask, I do continue to believe that growth in our enrollment is so critical. And I do see that we don't see a significant amount of growth in the projections. Didn't know if the treasurer wanted to address that. Of course, part of it is, as was mentioned, we don't have those preschool numbers, so the numbers look, because the state doesn't recognize those. I get that, but can the treasurer or Mr. Ashley talk a little bit about the projection for enrollment without necessarily saying that you're 98.2 usually close to correct? Is there another way to answer that helps me believe there's going to be more people enrolling in this district?
I was just gonna say that the biggest enrollment growth that we're seeing in total enrollment is the preschool and kindergarten students.
Right.
So as those kids matriculate upward, our enrollment is anticipated to grow.
So much as we talk in terms of staff retention or recruitment and retention is also recruiting and retaining our families and their children and their teenagers for us to get back into, as we are one of the rare growth urban districts, as pointed out by the Fordham Foundation. But we to accelerate that growth, we have to not just do the same things again and again. Treasurer Wagner?
I just wanted to point out and explain that while enrollment growth is fabulous and we love it, our property taxes do not grow with enrollment. So that dollar gets spread every thinner. And as the economies change across the state, so if the rest of the state gets poor, we get richer because a lot of the wealth index, and we're trying to put some slides together to explain this very difficult, complex formula. But so for every child that we receive, we're getting $4,000 from the state. But it costs us a lot more money to educate that one child. Even the state says it costs $8,000 per child on their base, just their base cost, right? But we're only getting 4,000. And then, so that makes the pressure on the rest of the budget that much harder. So we welcome students. We just need to figure out a way to fund them.
I agree. And just a response to that, since we have universal vouchers too, really is the fact that our public dollars are going to all forms of education in the state.
Additionally, with the rising cost of things such as fuel, that puts, and the public may not understand that we're responsible for transporting students that are residents but do not attend our schools. So we spend close to $8 million a year on transporting students that don't go to our schools. We do receive a reimbursement, but it's about 50 cents on the dollar. So that also puts a big challenge on educating our students.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lindy, I think you had your hand up.
Thanks, President Bolden. Treasurer Wagner, you made the point that I was going to raise, which is that because the state dollars do increase with additional enrollment, the property taxes do not. And so for every additional student we enroll, our per pupil spend goes down. And you just said it, I think, more articulately than I did.
Our per pupil revenue goes down, not necessarily the spend. Because it's the child, it costs the same to educate a child based on their needs, it changes, but.
You said great, what I was intending to say, which is that we're spreading the revenue that we have even further across more and more students. Yeah, thank you.
Member Moffitt.
So I just don't want us to leave the public with the impression that we don't want to grow our district. Because that is not the solution, nor I think is what you're saying. It's just really, we need to change the state funding formula to Member Morosky's point. We need to get elected officials at the State House, and we have some there, but who will advocate for us to have more money in the funding formula for our district. It's not to not grow enrollment.
Exactly. And I am sorry if I left that impression, but I did not mean that. The other nuance to the state funding formula is they apply the same staffing formulas to all districts in the state. So a district our size with 91 square miles, we have 65 buildings. They take the number of kindergartens in total and divide it by a ratio and say, this is how many teachers you should have in your district. Well, that doesn't chunk out in 65 even ways. And so if you do that, we end up having to fund more teachers than the state will fund us for.
Right.
And so there's transportation is the same way. We have much more square mileage than other districts. And so there's a lot of those kinds of challenges in the formula that still have yet to be addressed.
Other comments, Mr. Lindy?
I think this would be a great conversation for a future board meeting because I think there's a variety of perspectives on the board about growth. And I would like to give the impression that as one board member, I do not want to see us grow until we have a plan to pay for it responsibly. I think we've had a number of examples lately of us making decisions with no plan or with not a very well thought out plan. And I'd like to see us start to make intentional decisions with good thinking to do good things for children. Thank you.
And at the risk of adding more gasoline to a very calm evening, considering all things that are happening, part of that plan is called the ad hoc plan that deals with growth and also right sizing our buildings and the use of our facilities. So you're right. We're going to have that in another conversation down the road, but we've been talking about that for a while. And we also have a strategic plan left to implement. So that's all part of it, I think. Any other comments, questions? We good? Oh, Mr. Morosky.
Thank you. And this is also for a later time, I think, but I mean, there are also legislative solves to this. And I can't help but think about, with the preschool piece that was up today, the discussion of compulsory preschool, for example. And I know we had said something a while ago about having our lobbyists maybe think about that or work on it. So just to maybe highlight that again. I mean, we're lucky in this, Indiana doesn't even have compulsory kindergarten, which I thought was crazy. But so at least we have kindergarten. But if there was like compulsory preschool, there's solves like that too. I want to make sure we keep those on the radar.
Yeah, and part of that lobbying would be that we at least let the state count our preschoolers as part of our expense. So I mean, surely we can work on those sorts of things. Thanks, Mr. Morosky. Any other comments? I think you did okay.
Thank you.
I can't believe it, but I'll try to absorb it. Appreciate it. We have on number 10, this is just a reminder, and it's nothing we have to do anything with at this time. And that is, you'll recall that the last two meetings, we've introduced the resolution for a first reading and then for discussion, and wasn't really a technical second reading, but a reading that makes us talk in terms of, I'll do it right here, resolution to consider a proposed non-renewal of administrator contracts pursuant to a higher revised code. I think as we recall the discussion, our hope was that we would want in the more traditional way to be able to appropriately, properly use our administration's recommendations to move forward. So right now we're kind of suspending that discussion regarding that resolution. And I think, unless anybody has any comment about that. We need to move on then to the next. And a part of it is as we move to the superintendent's recommendations. There's previously been discussion, but we need to kind of have motion and a second before we have discussion formally about the superintendent's recommendation. Is there anyone want to delay the formality of a motion and a second before we discuss, or did I pass something up? Yes, Member Moffett.
So in light of the conversation around the budget, I would like to make a motion that we table the superintendent's recommendations until our next meeting, hopefully. I know we talked about maybe having a meeting in May so that we can get a better understanding of the figures, who would be hired, what that cost would be. I would much rather do that and delay it a week or so rather than to hire people to turn around and have to let them go.
Well, I think that's something to talk about. I think what we want to do, unless somebody has a better idea regarding tabling, the options would be to ask the administration to pull, but more particularly, if we table, let me ask general counsel if there's a motion to table whatever part of this or all of it. Do we have to have a motion and a second first before we have a table motion to table? Because I'm not foreseeing that well, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. She did. Make sure we're doing whatever we're planning on doing right.
Are you asking to table the entire superintendent's recommendations?
Well, right now, that's where the discussion went, and we haven't introduced the superintendent's recommendations yet in a motion and a second. So we're looking for the order.
I mean, there's
of what is
no need
required.
to introduce them if you're only going to table them. Right now, they're not, yeah.
Thank you. Member Moffett?
So this is my first time doing this, so please give me a little grace, everybody. Is it possible to just table the things that would require additional funds? And maybe, I don't know if there's any, if people need to get paid for certain things, if that's already set. I don't want to delay people having funds that were already dedicated, but I do think that we need to be responsible with regard to promotions that are listed in there. But so I don't know if you can table part of it and not of
This is a
it.
parliamentary question. And I think we've asked before, indeed, whether or not you can table certain items rather than the whole document. That's the issue. Treasurer Wagner.
Just to clarify, that's what I was recommending, because I think some of the stipends is for work that's past done. And I'm not suggesting the or the retirements or to table any of that.
Right.
Just anything that's new, that's not a compliance required position.
Well, then the motion would have to be around that rather than the entire recommendation, unless you wanted to do the whole thing.
No, I just
Okay.
wanted to do that part.
I think that would be best. So maybe if we can introduce with a motion,
So then my motion would be to,
would make a motion to accept superintendent's recommendations. So we can have a discussion about it.
so I make a motion to accept the superintendent's recommendation.
Second.
And now we have discussion. We're not voting yet there. She's got her pen ready to go. The discussion on the table, well, I better not say on the table. The discussion is whether or not for purposes of budget, the suggestion has been that we table those things that are additional costs. Member Moffett, do you want to
That is
explain
correct.
a little bit?
Yes. I do not want to delay stipends that are due for past due work. What I would like to pause is any additional expenditure of positions that could possibly be on the in discussions for non-renewal or budget discussions.
Vice President?
So I think the question would be, if we're looking on page 3 in terms of promotion, is that possible to just pull those particular items off of this particular superintendent's recommendation?
I would ask the treasurer to look at those items and see if those are the items to which she's referring. And those would be the items that Member Moffat's referring.
So Dan and I were just conferring, the letter C, my recommendation would be to go ahead and appoint the principals, because that is a required position. And then hold
that's
on
to
the.
Euler?
Yes.
I think that was for D.
Yes.
We're
D, yeah,
referring
so I
D.
would say
Promotion.
item C,
Say it one more time.
item C.
So you're
Yep.
on section C for appointment versus D for promotion?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm not saying that those won't happen. We just need a little bit of time to figure out, right?
So
Yes,
Just
Mr.
to-
Morosky.
just to make sure I heard it right earlier, we're essentially talking about the new hires. Because if it comes up that we would have to remove these positions or positions, period, the first people to go would be brand new hires. So we're talking about new hires.
Right.
Okay, for positions that aren't required by it said, yeah, okay.
But to the treasurer's point of view, it's the fact that the law requires us to have a principal at Euler. That's not it might be a new person, but it's not a new position or, okay, so would be one. Is that correct? Mr. Lindy? We might wait till then. I don't think he did either. Question is it C or D? Let me do Mr. Lindy and then I'll come back. You good? Okay. Vice President has a clarification.
Yes, so if we could just go back, I just wanted to clarify, are we discussing section C or section D or both?
You're discussing both.
Okay, so we are talking about the appointment and we're talking about the promotion. I think my clarification question was just for section D, but you're saying that your recommendation is to do C and D? But without the Euler principle? I just want to make sure I understand.
Correct. C and D, but not the Euler principle. So move the Euler principle forward, but not the other ones in C and D. That's the treasurer's recommendation.
And what was the rationale for moving the principle forward? I just wanted to make sure I heard correctly.
You're required by state law to have
a
a principal.
principal. Thank you. Just wanted to make that aware. Thank you.
Which page are you on, Jen? Sorry.
Page 1 and 2. On the certificated side.
Mr. Lindy?
So I'm all for not committing us to unstudied long-term funding obligations. I just want to make sure that I'm not totally convinced that's applies equally to everything that is in C and D. So I just want to check. If we look at D, for example, is promotions. Let's say we're looking at an elementary assistant principal promotion. And there are 3 of them listed. You can see it's Lamisa Muhammad, Jennifer Scheiderer, Evan Wilder. So these are positions that I'm assuming were funded in our FY24 budget, or these are the FY25 budget?
These are new positions for the FY25
They're
budget.
new positions. They're new positions.
That's correct, Ms. Smith, right?
That's true.
And are these people, treasurer, who have been told they are receiving a promotion? Yeah, for my part, it feels deeply unfair to change course on them at this a point in the game, just from where I'm sitting.
My response to that is I would feel badly too, but the problem is nothing is done until we do it. And so, I mean, that's the reality. And these are new positions that have not existed previously, probably all needed and probably all great people, but these do not represent positions that currently exist. And based upon what the treasurer is telling us or what Member Moffett has brought forward is, can we do this for fiscal 25? Mr. Morosky?
For the treasurer again, during your presentation, you said it pretty directly and you kind of said it again just now fairly quickly, that this is not saying that these people will not receive this position if we can get somewhere after your team with the 6 union heads, et cetera, come together. If we can get to a place where we're not looking at rifts and layoffs, that it would be possible. So my question would be, and this might be a hard or unfair question, I hope it's not, and I don't expect a date, but when would they know, you know what I mean? So like if there was time, is it 2 months, is it a month? It's probably not even possible to answer. So I don't want to put you on the spot. If you can't, no problem, but.
I know, and I feel horrible about the timing of this, but, one of the recommendations that was not adopted was a reduction in the AP structure. And so I can't commit to a time, but I could let you know a better time by the end of the week.
Thank you.
This is just a process question. So if we delayed this particular 2 line items, C and D, we would then see it in the next report, possibly?
It's possible.
Member Mapp and then Member Moffett.
Okay, thank you, President Bolton. I'm just still trying to process, given the fact that there has already been a process in place for these potential promotions. And so at that time, were we not considering what the finances would look like to correlate with this potential promotion? Because again, if they've already gone through being told or being informed that these are promotions that would be available to them, I guess I'm just trying to figure out how we are now at this point where it may not be an option.
So the positions don't exist until you approve a budget. The new positions don't exist until you approve a budget. During the recruiting, positions are offered in anticipation of a budget being approved. But in this case, they don't really exist yet. And because we haven't balanced the budget and received an approval to move forward.
Okay, thank you.
So I just want a point of clarification because I don't want anyone to be without their job, but it says that it wouldn't be effective until August the 1st. So we're not talking about them losing their jobs. This is in theory, again, like you said, until it's been approved, but it wouldn't even be effective until August the 1st. Am I understanding that correctly?
Correct. Of the 4 APs in these recommendations, 3, I believe, are current teachers and 1 is a new hire. So
Okay.
3 are.
Gave me a mic, but big mouth. It's not, they understand that it's not official until they go through board minutes. And we've had this conversation with Ms. Wagner and we feel awful too. We're gonna call the principals and let them know as soon as you guys make a decision so that they know things are on hold and then reach out to those people. And
So I just wanted to clarify, this is not even effective, even if we were to approve it today, it would not be effective until August the 1st. We have some time, in theory, before August the 1st, in order to vote on this. So it could very well happen. I'm proposing this because when we last met and had a discussion around the budget, it was $13 million. And I was perfectly comfortable with all of these new positions, very uncomfortable at 6 million, but very, very uncomfortable at 13. And I am super uncomfortable at 30. What makes me even more uncomfortable is to offer to have these individuals accept this and then to turn around and have to rescind it. I think that's, I just think that that's horrible. Point of clarification, they will still remain in their positions. It's not like they're being recommended for fire. It's just the promotion part that would not happen, that I'm asking, can we just pause on that? Is that they still have positions, the positions.
I believe one of them is an external candidate that we have that's very good. I mean, and I can't remember exactly if she's employed somewhere else. I just know she's an external candidate. So definitely we'll be reaching out to her immediately.
Okay.
Yes.
And I do want to, I heard you say that there was one of the recommendations months ago that was to not have these positions as a form of the budget cuts, right? And it just was not accepted by the administration. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's in one of the lists that you were given tonight on the list that was the brainstorm list that came from the board directly that included things from the unions and the community.
Right.
And it was a recommendation to go back to the old formula And there was one recommendation to even eliminate the APs of culture, because that was a new role. It started out under Esser. I think the original conversation that was gonna be there for a year to help to get the culture back in the high schools, but so they were able to move those over to Title I. So
Right.
it's the positions that are in the general fund that are causing issues.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to say that the SCPA is not a new position. Mr. Copenhaver is retiring. So that position we would definitely need to approve because that's not new. He has a AP that is retiring this year. So that would just be a replacement of what we already have. So I don't want that one not to go through because that's not adding money to the budget.
Do you know where that is?
He's on the, he's on the
So
recommend,
do you know
he's in
which-
the recommendations. His name,
It's on the bottom of page 1.
bottom of page 1.
It's not in the C or the D, is it?
So my
It's in
motion
C.
was just for new positions.
Just a point of clarification before I go to member map. Some months ago, just for the public's benefit, some months ago, it was a recommendation by the administration that the long-held view that a principal would be needed and an AP principal would be needed at a particular enrollment size. And that when a building had a certain enrollment size, and I don't know, the treasurer might know if the specific number, for a number of years, there were not APs, assistant principals, at those smaller schools. And we do have a number of schools that have far less than what was the previous number to ever get an AP. I still don't understand why there's not an additional AP at Carson, but that's another issue that seems to be a problem. So we changed that as a plan. So the two positions that we're talking about, at least tonight, would be only because of that change. Is that right? Because I'm glad Chief Smith mentioned SCPA, because that is an established, and the principal piece has to be there by law.
The two positions that we're asking to go forward is the secondary system principal at SCPA, because that's replacing a retirement, and that position's been there for years. And then the principal boiler.
Thank
New addition. I keep pushing the button because Rob, he's so efficient. He cutting me off and on. The additional ones were based on the new number of the 350. So those are new based on the new number that we put in place last year.
Thank you. Member Matt.
Thank you, President Bolton. So I recognize that, yes, nothing is official until the board approves it. I guess my concern or my question is, what will be the impact if we decide to delay this, in terms of how would that affect just what's happening at the schools on a school-based level? How would that impact our pool of candidates? And so, yeah, so what will be the impact of all of this if we delay the process and the planning for our schools?
Thank you, Member Matt.
I think that the delay, member map, is just that the principals were set to go with the people that they hired. They went through the process. They probably would start some planning with them to prepare for the school year. We've did a lot with the pipeline to get this bench going. I think the sooner that we communicate, everybody kind of understands that we're in a bad place with budget. I think that is going to help us to explain that to them. It's not going to feel good. I think the principals are going to be concerned because they were looking forward to this additional support to move the work.
Thank you, Dr. Smith.
Other comments? Any other points to be made regarding these exceptions in the motion? Is you want to repeat where we are, that was either to pull, but we can't really pull. It's the administration's determination to pull, or is it the board wishes to table? These, I think, two positions. Is that what I'm hearing?
It's two positions moving forward, and 1, 2, 3, 4 positions being on hold.
Or 4 on hold?
the Euler principal moving forward and the SCP assistant principal moving forward. And then the 4 new APs are on hold. And we will share that with them just on hold as we work through this process.
This is strictly for financial, not any
Strictly for
other
financial.
performance or other issues.
Yes.
Would someone like to make that motion regarding those positions in a second?
So just as a point of clarification, was that not what my original motion was? Or do I just need to be more specific?
I think if this is a little bit more specific, and the reality is, instead of tabling it, I would, if we don't table it, then it's a vote against it. And I don't think anybody on the board wants to make an exception and vote these down. I think people are concerned about those 4 positions being tabled temporarily. So rather than voted down, I mean, our normal way to do this, when the administration would refuse or not feel that they should pull, we would vote exceptions. Like we would say everything but. We're not doing that. I don't think there's a comfort level to do that. If the comfort level is that we would like, this is my reading of what's being discussed, table those 4 to give them a sense that it's not a vote against them or those positions.
And those 4 are the new hires. Okay, so I make a motion that we table the 4 new hires and advance the 2 state mandatory required positions of principal, Euler, assistant principal at Performing Arts.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
There was a second?
Second.
Just double checking. Now that we have a motion and a second, any further discussion now that we've reached this point of clarification? Yes, sir.
Just since it's kind of a wonky thing, I just want to catch the eyes of our general counsel, and not because I don't trust Dr. Moffett, it's just kind of a, was that worded the right way? Okay, everyone, okay, I just wanted to make sure.
He could, but the lawyer could make it longer for us. I know he couldn't make the discussion longer than this has been, but he could make it. Are we good with it? All right.
No, I appreciate you, Board Member Morosky.
You don't want to do anything wrong. Member Matt?
Yes, I just have a point of clarity. What would be the recommendation for the vote if we want to move all forward? Move all of the recommendations forward.
I think since we, correct me if I'm wrong, we have a motion on the floor that we would be voting specifically rather than we're going through and saying everything but. Help me out. Our normal process would have been everything but we want to vote down this. But now what we've done is we don't want to vote these positions down. We want to table these positions.
What I understand is happening is that Dr. Moffett has moved to hold on those 4 positions. And so that you could vote against her motion. You could vote for or against her motion.
Yeah.
Once that motion's resolved,
Then
then I
we-
think you'd vote on the full
Yeah,
superintendent.
then we can come back to the recommendations in total. You vote the motion up or down.
Okay, so you're saying we're voting specifically on the motion that
motion.
you made about these, okay. Just hold, okay. Okay.
Mr. Lindy?
There's just some significant confusion about Robert's rules, and we can tackle this tonight or another day, but anytime there's a motion on the floor, any member of the body, including Ms. Mapp, can make a motion to amend the motion that's on the floor. So you could say, I disagree, I'm making a motion for an amendment that it include those 4. And then someone would need to second your amendment, or the motion maker could decide it's for, and anyway, there are rules for these things. We can decide whether we want to follow them tonight or not.
Well, I think we're following okay on the tabling. And we are changing our process about the recommendations. So we right now have a vote on the floor for a motion. Is that correct, Mr. General Counsel?
Motion, excuse me.
Hey, why don't you just sit up here with me?
The motion to table those 4 is what I understand is on the table right now.
And that's what we're voting on now. So we do have a second, and so we don't need any more discussion. It's time to vote on the motion.
Okay. Mr. Lindy,
No.
Ms. Mapp,
No.
Dr. Moffett,
Yes.
Mr. Morosky,
Yes.
Vice President Weinberg.
Yes.
President Bolton.
Yes. So those 4 items are at least tabled, and now we will entertain a motion to accept the superintendent's. You have a question?
Apologize, but one of the Snyder was the Carson AP, and Carson has no APs now.
But, well, it's a new position.
No, it's not new. It's replacing her. She doesn't have an AP now. Right now, she has a sub administrator.
Oh, okay, but this,
So,
so it's an existing.
yes, I just didn't want us to not, she needs that one and one more as we've stated, but we don't want that one to not go through. So it's 3 that we're holding on instead of 4. I apologize, you guys.
So the motion is new positions were tabled, but that is not a new position, according to Chief Smith.
Corrected.
Corrected? Vice President?
So do we need to redo the
No.
motion or are we good to go, knowing that it would be the 3 schools, Carson, SCPA, and Euler?
Happy to do it if we need to. I don't know that we do, but if it's been corrected.
Dan?
Do we have to, since it was a wrong number, do it again or? Okay, go for it. Make the motion.
So I make a motion regarding the superintendent's recommendations that we hold on 3 positions that were new, only the positions that were new, and we approve the remainder of the recommendations.
4. Do you want to say the school?
Do I need to say
For
the school?
those 2 schools.
Just 3
no,
schools.
That's why I said the 3 schools
And the others move forward. Okay.
and the others move forward.
There's a second, you got that?
Second.
All right, we're gonna take that motion again. Thanks for catching that, Chief Smith.
Mr. Lindy,
Still no.
Ms. Mapp,
No.
Dr. Moffat,
Yes.
Mr. Morosky,
Yes.
Vice President Weinberg,
Yes.
President Bolton.
Yes. And now we need a motion to accept the recommendations of the superintendent. Do I have a motion to accept the recommendations of the superintendent?
So moved. So moved.
Thank you. I'm still on the superintendent, aren't we? Yeah, it's the superintendent. We've tabled things from the superintendent.
Right.
I think we're still.
We never put the superintendent's report
Yeah.
On the floor. It wasn't an amendment. It
We're
was
on
a
the
separate motion.
superintendent, not the treasurer,
It was a
right?
separate.
Okay, we're on the superintendent recommendation.
I'm sorry, who did the motion and who did the second?
No, this is for the superintendent recommendation, the big one,
Right.
okay?
I have Dr. Moffat as a motioner and Mr. Morosky as a
Yes.
seconder, okay? The revised superintendent recommendations,
Yes, please.
okay. Mr. Lindy,
No.
Ms. Mapp,
This is about the superintendent's recommendations.
correct, with the table positions off of it, so
Yes.
everything left.
Okay.
So this is all the rest of the superintendent
Yes.
recommendation.
Did you say yes? Thank you. Dr. Moffat,
Yes.
Mr. Morosky?
Yes.
Vice President Weinberg?
Yes.
President Bolton?
Yes. All right, well, that was good that we did that, got that clear. Okay, do I have a motion to approve the revised treasurer's report?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion about the treasurer's report? And treasurer, you have something revised report. Do you have something to share with us?
I do, but please, Mr. Lindy, you go first.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, President Bolton. I'll be voting no with respect to the item on page 20, which is the item accepting the resignation of Superintendent Wright. I said this last week, and I will say this again. This is a terrible, terrible mistake, and I say this for several reasons. I said this last time, under the usual parliamentary procedure rules, speakers have 10 minutes. I will not take all 10 minutes, but I will take a few. First, we are seeing progress as a district. We have the second highest math gains post-COVID of the 44 largest urban districts in the country. Reading scores are up, chronic absenteeism is down. Parent satisfaction, according to the 3,000 family members who took our most recent survey, is up. Second, there are real red flags with the union's stated concerns behind the votes of no confidence. To list just one, a major complaint was the alleged top-down nature of the budget process. The red flag for me is that back in the fall, union leadership instructed their members not to participate in any of the budget roundtables or budget surveys. From my perspective, you don't get to stand on the sidelines and then criticize the results afterwards. You may hear that our efforts to engage stakeholders violated labor laws, but according to our lawyer, this is just not true. Third, this transition is just reckless because there is no plan. When Superintendent Laura Mitchell transitioned, this board had 6 weeks to select an interim, and we were able to engage with the outgoing superintendent on a plan. This week, the board has tried to select an interim in 6 days. We've gone from 6 weeks to 6 days. We interviewed candidates this evening for a grand total of 10 minutes each, with no requests for data or work product or references. There's been no effort to engage Superintendent Wright on the transition process. In fact, for reasons that I still don't understand, she was asked not to attend these discussions. The whole thing has been rushed and conducted behind closed doors in the middle of a budget crisis of our own making. This is not the way to provide good governance for a district. Following the vote later tonight, we will have our 4th top leader in 3 years. This churn and dysfunction we've had on display these past few months, with those in place, it will be impossible to attract strong leadership to this superintendency. Fourth, and this may be the most important, we have and had other options in front of us that a board majority was unwilling to consider. I would list the idea of a third-party mediator. I would list the idea of engaging the superintendent on a more thoughtful, rigorous, responsible transition process. Instead, we are pushing out a talented leader from outside Cincinnati who has been generating progress for children and families. I will be voting no on this item, and I will be abstaining from a vote on an interim. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lindy. Any other comments or questions or part of the discussion? I have only one. Mrs. Mitchell did not leave us in this situation that we are finding ourselves right now when she left. Any discussion of treasurer's report? Treasurer.
Yes, I just wanted to point out that the 5-year forecast is in there and needs to be adopted tonight in order for us to file on time. But I also wanted to point out that we have received a very generous grant award from the Community Center Learning Institute, otherwise known as Clicky, to update and move the medical and dental clinic at Roberts Academy in the amount of $668,000. Very generous. So I wanted to thank Clicky.
Thank you for highlighting that. I know that on June 3rd, we're going to find a way to help celebrate that generosity, as well as celebrate our deep commitment to widespread community partnership and collaboration internally, as well as celebrate that we are able to bring these opportunities to our children and teenagers only because of the generosity of our community. We're going to pass then. I guess we're ready to, any other comments for the treasurers? All right, I think we're ready to vote.
Mr. Lindy?
No with respect to the item on page 20, yes on everything else.
Ms. Mapp?
No on well, yes on everything else except for page 20, as well as I would like to abstain from the noun certificates, line items 1 through 8, 15, and 23.
Did you say 23?
Yes.
Thank you. Dr. Moffitt?
Yes.
Mr. Morosky?
Yes.
Vice President Weinberg?
Yes.
President Bolton?
Yes. Thank you very much. There's a proposed consent agenda that's been distributed. Treasurer Wagner, is any exceptions are meant? Would you please keep a record of those exceptions and the causes as well as the acceptors? Do I have a motion to accept the consent agenda, which includes approval of minutes that are listed, acceptance of committee reports, which are listed, and also resolutions which are listed? Are there any exceptions to be noted for whatever reason? Hearing no exceptions, do I, let's see, a motion to accept the consent agenda as approved
So
or
moved.
hopefully approved?
Second.
Thank you. We have a first, we have a second. Vote.
Wait, are we able to have discussion?
Oh, I'm sorry. You did make an exception, so I
Oh,
moved
sorry.
on.
I just have a question for Treasurer Wagner. If she
Okay,
would,
that's allowable.
thank you, just elaborate on resolution number 2. So accepting the amounts and rates as determined by the Budget Commission for the
All
tax
right,
levy.
so thank you for the question. So this is every year, this is a once a year thing where the Hamilton County or the county auditors recalculate the millage rates based on valuation so that we're not over collecting or under collecting on our revenue, on our levies. And so they calculate the rates and the board has to adopt them in a resolution, and then we file that with the Hamilton County auditor.
Okay, thank you for the
You're welcome.
clarification.
Roll call.
Let me make sure I'm on the right page. Mr. Lindy, Ms. Mapp,
Yes.
Dr. Moffat,
Yes.
Mr. Morosky,
Yes.
Vice President Weinberg,
Yes.
President Bolton.
Yes. Seeing tonight, we do not have any inquiries or update topics for the administration, so we'll move on to board matters. And we have for our board matters, a board bylaw request from Mr. Morosky.
Thank you. And this is largely member Lindy's request, and he's been leading the conversation in policy committee. So I'll kind of just keep, there he is. The story behind what you have in front of you, and I passed out a new version that's just one-sided and it only has this amended language. And I'm going to let Mr. Lindy introduce it and talk about it, but I'm just going to give a quick backstory. So Mr. Lindy had asked if we could put on an agenda a couple months ago, like a conflict of interest type of amendment to wording, whether it became a policy or an amendment to bylaws, we didn't know. We talked about it at the last meeting. Mr. Lindy brought a couple options because in April at that meeting, one of the options had some wording regarding like votes and the members had voted a certain way that then after the fact, the vote may not have counted, and he'll go into detail about all of it. So we had questioned with council whether or not you could even do that. The heart of this, and I know Mr. Lindy will say this better than me when he introduces it, is sort of like elevating ethics, putting it in the forefront, which of course I'm always about. So I said, put it in the committee. The last meeting noted like whether or not I end up voting on this as a member of the full body, I don't know, but as chair, most of y'all have been on that committee with me. You can bring whatever you want. But I thought it was a good idea, and Ms. Mapp and Mr. Lindy agreed to bring it to the full board to have a discussion. So what you see before you now would, if approved, and this will go back to policy. Nobody's asking anybody to vote on, I don't think. But this would go back to policy, which meets incidentally on May 29th. We are not, that'll count as our June meeting because we can't meet in June. So we're going to be meeting again soon. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Lindy, if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Morosky. It's been a good couple discussions, last few meetings about this in policy committee. And to Chair Morosky's point, this really does go back several months to the first conversations about this. But I think, big idea was you were serving as board members during a time when we're working particularly hard to strengthen public trust. I think, I have a couple of examples here, all of which actually predate the last couple of weeks. Whether it's about COVID or transportation challenges or the budget process or community concerns about school consolidations, I think there are all kinds of ways in which we can strengthen public trust. And one of the things that I think can do that is having a very clear, very high bar for conflict of interests. I think this is particularly important, really under any circumstances, but even just given the history of this city over the last several years, looking with the different city council challenges that have happened, ways that Cincinnati government has been in the news for all the wrong reasons. It feels like having really clear and high expectations for ourselves around conflicts would be a good thing. And there's been plenty of shade thrown at Columbus this evening. I'll just add a little bit more. Several of our most recent speakers of the House have had offices raided by the FBI and thrown in prison. You know, and so I think just ways that we can make every effort to show that there is not even an appearance of a conflict of interests between money and decisions that people make here on the school board would be a good thing. So what I introduced in policy was an addendum to our conflict of interest policy. I think what people have on this one page is actually the second version. I think we Mr. Morosky, do we have a copy of the first version?
This is the version that we had agreed on. The first version, well, you had it, I handed out the first version that had the language about
That's the second one.
cumulative. The first one that was at our table said cumulative.
Yeah, but there was.
Oh, you're talking about oh, no, it's not here.
Okay.
We can get it real quick
We
though.
we don't have to, but I think my understanding was
Because
we're
this
going to
one-
show
sorry.
everybody both of them. And that, am I making things up, Mr. Morosky?
No, I was just gonna say the other one, keep talking. I believe it was in the minutes.
And it's
though.
okay. I mean, this is the one that the committee supported. But I think it was helpful to have it go through a month of analysis from legal counsel. But the basic idea is a policy that encourages board member recusal from discussion or votes that impact individuals or groups who have made major campaign contributions. And so I'll give everybody a chance to just look at this. But then, you know, happy if Member Mapp has anything she wants to share or Mr. Morosky wants to add from our discussions in the committee, and then we can have some discussions as a group. And I think from a process standpoint, echoing Mr. Morosky, intention tonight was to share what we've been talking about, what the rationale was, what the current draft is, gather feedback from the full board, and take that back to our meeting that's happening next week.
Yeah, I thought so. Okay. So, yeah, no, just so for clarity, yeah, the first one, the other option that you're talking about is in the minutes. That's what I thought. But this was the one, yeah, that came out of committee that we thought agreed upon was better than the other one.
Vice President?
Yes, thank you, Board Member Lindy, for further discussing this. I am curious. I would love to ask Board Member Mapp. I was not able to attend the meeting or watch the meeting. Just wanted to get a little bit more of your perspective on this particular, I guess, addition, since he stated that you would be in agreement with this as well.
Yeah, so this is something that, you know, I am in support of any way or any opportunity that we are able to make sure that we're upholding ethics and being very transparent and making sure that there is that level of trust. I think it's important. And as I stated in our policy meeting, this is something that I do regularly, even in our actual board meetings. So recusing myself from different organizations or anyone that has contributed to me either personally or during my campaign. So I always want to make sure that we're upholding that level of ethics. So this is something that I am in support of, and that was my contribution during our discussion as well.
Vice President?
And then I just wanted to hear from Board Member Morosky.
Like I said at the last meeting, I mean, I wanted to hear from everybody else at the board, and I said at the May policy meeting, I'm uncertain if I would vote for this at the end of the day, but I do think any conversation about elevating the ethics and all is worth having. But I don't know what this will look like at the end of the day. And there was in the other option, which is in the minutes, and if you want to go back to the April policy meeting, the major question I had was whether or not it was even legal, because I don't know, because it talked about like taking away a vote, and that power is given to us by the public, not so. But that's how we settled on this one.
Yeah.
Other comments, questions?
I was just going to say thank you so much for clarifying this for just a little bit. I do have some further questions, but again, it was from the legal perspective. But again, we can talk about this a little later.
I mean, if I may, I don't want to, I'm not the chair of this meeting, but I mean, that's what this is about right now.
Okay, so just going off a little bit of what you said about with the recusing themselves or then taking away the vote, I'm wondering if that is legal, is from, you know, our legal counsel, if you could further comment on that in particular. And the wording for this, has any other board utilized something similar to this as well? I'm just kind of curious in terms of this particular wording in this particular edition.
Not aware of any other precedent. I think Board Member Lindy had looked at a precedent in New Mexico Not sure of the legalities of New Mexico law, so Ohio is different. The discussion we had at policy committee was that that this goes further than Ohio's ethics law, so I think that's right. And then in terms of analyzing the legality of it, we focused on the board cannot vote one of its members off, right? You cannot, you're all elected officials. You can't vote a member off. You also can't take away a board member's right to exercise their legal duties as a board member. You can't stop someone from voting. You can't exclude them from the room or from discussions. So now, by contrast, you can censure each other. You can vote for who's on committees, and vote for official titles. You could vote, where you sit, what your seating arrangement is. Those are the sorts of things that the board can do to enforce its own rules.
And you stated that this was a little bit more expansive than the Ohio ethics.
It certainly is.
Okay. Thank you.
The low bar.
Mr. Lindy.
Yeah, I appreciate the questions. Thank you, President Bolden and Vice President Weinberg. I appreciate the questions. I think to Mr. Morosky's joke, I agree with him. To say that this goes beyond what the Ohio Ethics Commission requires is not to say that that is a bad thing. I think that the point that we were making in the committee was that the Ethics Commission establishes a floor. And I think we're operating in a time where holding ourselves to a higher standard than the floor is excellent. I pulled up the version that we looked at the first time, and there are some real differences. In the first version, it said basically you have to recuse yourself from a vote if it affects an organization or an individual that gave above $5,000 to your campaign. That's not what, I still think that's the right thing to do, by the way, and I plan on doing that myself, whether we pass this policy or not. But this does not do that. What this does is say that if the board member chooses to vote on something that directly impacts a campaign donor that gave over $5,000, then that board member does that knowing that they'll lose committee assignments and board leadership positions. I think that's the right thing to do. I think we should be recusing ourselves from votes that impact organizations or individuals that give $5,000 or more to campaigns. So this was an effort to come up with a thoughtful way of advancing values that I think build public trust and are important, while also being really thoughtful about not stepping outside the bounds of what we're allowed to do. And I really do credit Dan and Stephanie for having really good research and feedback on this. I really do credit the conversations we had in the committee. I think this is a significantly better version than the one that we started with.
Member Moffett, then we'll go to Member Mapp.
So I appreciate all of the work that's been done. Thank you to Dan and Stephanie, our general counsels. But I will share that my feedback is that this feels very targeted, and it could very well be that the people that decided to put it on, I feel that it's targeted there. I think that this should be the Ohio ethics, which unfortunately we've had to deal with a lot lately. I think that they're very clear that on the parameters that are set for all elected officials, to go a little further with specifics that to me feel very subjective. It talks about our inability to collaborate and work together and be able to individually, as you've demonstrated, recuse yourself when needed. That should be something that board members, when we talk about adult behaviors, should be able to do individually. I don't think we need a policy in order to do that. I am concerned about who is going to decide this. Who decides who has violated something? Is there going to be someone that is looking up contributions, or is that for individual board members to report that? And again, that should be an individual decision rather than the board doing that. I think the word major contribution feels subjective to me. What might be major for one is not major to another. And again, this feels less like the work of students and more like policing each other and trying to use policy to do that. And I just feel like this is the wrong direction to go. we need to hold each other accountable to things that matter to student outcomes, as my colleague shares quite frequently. And this doesn't feel like that. This feels like a policy that is used to perhaps antagonize other board members or, heaven forbid, target looking for something with specificity. So I don't support this because I think it's the board has precious time, and this is not something that I think we need to be working on with regard to policing each other. I'd like to say that I may disagree with my colleagues, but I do trust you to report accurately what you need to do and to recuse yourself appropriately. So I'm not necessarily in favor of this.
Member Mapp, and again, we're not voting today. We are having a discussion, so policy can take it back and make the adjustments they feel they need to. Member Mapp.
Thank you. So yes, in the policy committee meeting, it was an opportunity to make sure that we were having balance with the conversation, to ensure that, yes, as board members, we're all being accountable. And I think it helps to set a tone and a precedent to show that we are being responsible and we are being good servant leaders in how we present. And yes, we have an opportunity to collaborate with our constituents and those that support us, but we do want to make sure that we're doing it from an objective lens. And so I think this helps to maintain that level of objectivity as well as accountability.
Thank you, Member Mapp. We'll go back to Vice President and Mr. Morosky. We good? You're good?
I'm good. Thank you.
I'm not good. I just in the interest of full transparency here, I do think something like this is been done in Albuquerque, New Mexico, as I think, or I think that's the right town. I have an issue with this to a certain extent. First of all, I don't like that we've conflated our behavior with the behavior of the crooks and the scandalous folks in Columbus, or the folks that are serving time in jail in city council. No example could be developed regarding the Cincinnati School Board. So I don't appreciate being compared where there is scandal, where there has been abuse of power, and suggest that because it's there, we have to do something here in the interest of trust or objectivity or whatever it is. The other piece that I have with this, and it's very obvious, I think, the intent and the reality. Part of me is to suggest the Supreme Court has said campaign contributions are protected as First Amendment rights. What this really is an attempt to make campaign contributions unnecessary and unuseful to ever express somebody's support or a group's support. The reality is if you got, let's say, if any one of us got $5,000 from an organization, the Ohio ethics would not recognize that if that came from a political organization or a labor organization or a corporate lobbying group, because that kind of support is protected by the Constitution, according to the Supreme Court. And if you were to get a little further down the road, as you guys talk about this in policy, try to determine what is actually meant, as Member Moffitt said, is what's major. There's a number of $5,000. So if somebody were to have gotten $5,000 from either the Cincinnati Business Committee or the CFT, they would not be able to pass any vote or have any vote on anything that directly or indirectly impacted that organization. I mean, is that what this is saying? So if you got it, if that's what that's saying, then indeed, it's not what it's saying. Tell me what it's saying then.
So you're adding so this is a good conversation and thank you.
Absolutely.
I have a number of thoughts. I'm keeping track of them. This is just one of them. I think you're adding the word indirectly.
Okay.
So the idea is that if there's a campaign contribution above $5,000, the New Mexico example in Albuquerque was $1,000, I think. It might have been, I'm not sure I remember that correctly. I think 1,000. But here was 5,000. Not to choose to recuse oneself from votes that directly impact the individual or organization that gave you 5,000. So it's very narrow on a direct impact, not an indirect one.
So just to follow that up, if you received $5,000 from the Cincinnati, let's see, well, let's stay with the unions on that. If you received $5,000 from CFT for your campaign for school board, you would be unable to vote on anything that impacted the teachers in the district?
You know, the example we talked about in the policy committee meeting was a utility bill, but we could also use the example of a union contribution. And I think regardless of who it's coming from, I think there is a point at which and I'm not saying this necessarily applies to anybody here. This is actually a good segue to what you mentioned earlier, Eve.
Okay.
I don't think we're city council. I don't think we're the past speakers. My hope is to keep us that way. And I think that I think for any I think there is a point at which a contribution can become so large that for a board member not to choose to recuse themselves on something that directly impacts that donor has an appearance of impropriety to it. And I just think that we do the public's work better by choosing to hold ourselves to a higher standard. And that's what this proposal is recommending.
And I would just respond to that with two things. First of all, it's your own integrity as to whether or not you are able to present yourself as a person of integrity when people are deciding whether or not to support you or endorse you or fund you. The other piece of it, I think, for us is not so much how much it is, but the transparency. Part of the interesting thing about some of these campaign contributions versus the ones that are individuals or ones that are gathered from different places and bundled together is that when you have a campaign finance report, the community does know by law what and who contributed to you. And so I think the transparency begins to be part of the cleansing of that experience. So, I mean, I think it would be great to get this back to committee and then bring it back. You all talk more about it. I just think that we have to be pretty obviously connecting. I like the idea of the utility company, but somehow the reality here is that this probably much more directly impacts those particular groups that have always been very much a part of the Cincinnati, if you will, a school board kind of interest, whether that's parent groups or whether it's community groups, labor groups, business groups, whomever. So I just think we need to tell it sort of like it is, but I welcome the discussion and have to have policy keep working on it. Does that require, it doesn't require an assignment, does it? Because it's going to go back to you.
No, it's already on the agenda for the 29th, I believe,
Cool.
right? Yeah, it's already there. So yeah, we can
Excellent.
distill this and come up with other questions and probably toss it back here at some point.
That'd be great. We
Thank you.
good?
Thank you.
Thanks for bringing it. I think it's useful. We'll go on then to B. And I think, Mr. Burkhardt, are you here to help us with this? I think this is the crossing guards experience. Did people down the line get this one? I brought a hard copy, I think, for folks. This was brought to us by Dr. Little. And Mr. Burkhardt's been kind enough to, if you need any more copies of that.
Yeah, I don't have much to add today on the memo or the letter that's being circulated. We got this late on Thursday, so it's only hours old at this point. But we've had a back and forth relationship with the city every, I would say, 5 to 6 years in relation to crossing guards. We are right now in year we have a 1-year agreement that can be renewed 3 times. So we're in the second year of that, hopefully getting to a 3rd year. We are trying to set up a meeting for next week to explore alternative arrangements and or see if there's any common ground that we can get at this point with the city.
Is, as we look at this, is it my reading that they don't want the current arrangement we have, that they are interested in a different arrangement?
Correct, and we don't know exactly what that is yet. Obviously, we've reached out so that we can get a meeting. So this is relatively new. It is relatively troubling, though, to if they are saying that the district now has to hire crossing guards. We have a very, very short window to do that before school starts.
Right. So this is the change. We've always paid, or not always, but in the last, I don't know how many years, Jen, we've been paying for the crossing guards.
The city used to pay for them under the old agreement, and then when they had budgetary crisis, they passed that cost on to us. So yes, we are paying for those, and we have been for the last 12 years, I guess.
Okay. And so it's not necessarily the money, but it's the additional responsibilities that we would have.
Yes, we would be the ones to hire those individuals, track to make sure that, you know, every intersection has that crossing guard that needs it, and then make sure that we are filling in those positions. Right now, the city handles all of that, and as I read it, this proposal is having CPS handle that.
I have a follow-up question if I could. My follow-up question is that our crossing guards, we may be paying for them, but they're hiring them, but they also are sanctioned, as I understand it, by the city. I mean, we can't send our employees out to direct traffic or stand in the middle of the street. And there's some sort of ownership the city has to have for these people to even have jurisdiction, what is it? Do we
So
know?
currently, they're employees. They're not, they're employees of the city.
Yes.
The city passed legislation, I think last year or the year before, authorizing the school board to either have volunteers or our own employees acting as crossing guards. Yes, there's some kind of a blessing that they give them, but yeah, the city passed legislation authorizing the board to hire.
My only recommendation of, as you guys proceed, is that that protection still be there for whomever's
Right.
doing that, or they're in trouble. Okay, other questions, comments? Not a big topic, but the administration's going to take care of this and look into this for us.
Yep.
Thank you. We are now at the let's see, next topic, the next 2 topics as we go. We need to, and don't leave the podium, Mr. General Counsel. Getting your steps in. It is very likely that we will have, by necessity, an additional meeting, and somebody has referenced it regarding when we were talking in terms of the superintendent's recommendations, and certainly as we look at the issue of non-renewals. We need to probably try to arrange, board members, 1 additional meeting for the specific purpose of making some sort of adjustments, whether it's personnel or whatever it is. What's the time frame that we have in front of us to have an extra meeting?
Administrative non-renewals must take place before the first day of June. So you have next week, the 28th, 29th, 30th, and 31st.
Okay, and is there something about notification? Is there some leadway that, in fairness to people, is
Yes,
there something the treasurer has to do? I know that we had that in that resolution.
Yes,
Can
Ohio
you
Revised
run through
Code
it for us? Tell us.
3319.02 says that an administrator has to receive their final evaluation and a recommendation for non-renewal at least 5 days before that board meeting.
So when would that mean that we would need to be doing that resolution?
Well, it would both mean that a recommendation would need to be given to that person between now and Friday and depending on when that, so the 21st, 22nd and 23rd, that's the next 3 days. If recommendations were given to an administrator during those 3 days, the board meeting could be held no sooner than the 28th. That's Tuesday, the 28th. If the recommendations were given to the administrator on the 24th, that's Friday, the meeting could be held no sooner than the 29th. So the 29th, 30th, or 31st are the kind of the last days that the board could act and non-renew an administrator.
Can members look at their calendars for those dates that the general counsel has now shared with us? We have Memorial Day on the 27th. There's that 5-day, 4-day, whatever lag time or announcement time or notification time. Does this require, is there anything about appearing before the board on any of these? Or is that how does that happen?
An administrator who's non-renewed has the opportunity to meet with the board in executive session.
So we would have to build that into the time frame. Is that correct?
Yes, if anyone requested.
So it'd be hard to do the 31st.
I'm sorry, that could be done the same day as the.
Okay,
yeah.
okay. Oh, yes. Yeah, we just lived through that. If folks are looking at their calendars, including the treasurer. Yes, sir.
Are we to assume that this meeting would be at like a regularly scheduled time or a committee of the whole time, or it could be whatever time we can make
Could
work?
be early morning all to the regular time like this.
Well, I'll just get us started to
Please.
try to help if that's, I could do the 29th in the afternoon or the 30th from like 10 a.m. on.
Okay,
I cannot do Tuesday or Friday.
okay.
President Bolton,
Yes,
just, I understand what the council was sharing about timeline and administrative non-renewals. I think what I'm unclear of is where is this list coming from of the proposed non-renewals?
administration and the task force, the transition force, whatever this is being called. I
That's
think that-
right, Treasurer.
Yes.
Okay. You should come to me last because I'm not sure what I'll be able to make that week. I'll do my best.
Okay, okay. Vice President?
The 30th after 12 p.m.
Okay. Member Moffett?
I can do it either of those schedules. The 30th after 12 works.
Okay. Thank you. And we'll check with Mr. Craig when we talk to him, or staff will anyway, Ms. Davis. Member Matt?
I have a question. Is this pertaining to the potential resolution of non-renewals?
It would pertain to the recommendations by the administration of non-renewals. It does not necessarily pertain, correct me if I'm wrong, to riffing. That can be done at a different time. It wouldn't necessarily pertain to reorganization, but the specific non-renewal would be coming, that we would have to be passing on.
Yeah, I need some help.
Try to provide a little clarity. So no, unless somebody wants to correct me. So I believe what member Mapp was asking is that resolution that's blank, that has no names on it, that we talked about the past 2 meetings, that would be if the board was saying it, and we're not meeting any time before then. This would be what the administration comes. So the answer is no.
Okay.
The simple answer is no, unless I'm wrong with your
It
question.
would come in the superintendent's
Yeah.
recommendation.
Yeah.
It's not the same thing.
Okay,
We
so,
have, it's
so
moot.
based off of,
That's moot.
wait,
It was clear that the board had no real interest in it, even
Gotcha.
though we needed to make the statement that indeed we could if we had to, and we preferred not to. Was at least my understanding of this, of the group. Yes,
so this is based off of whomever the potential interim superintendent possibly would be in addition to the rest of the administration. These recommendations will be coming forward.
as it would have before, yeah.
Okay. And what were
Anybody?
the proposed dates again? I can't do the 30th at all.
You can't do the 30th?
And the
Can you
29th
do
is
the
quite
29th? Or the 30th? Not the 30th, but maybe the 29th?
possibly the 29th, but can't guarantee that right now.
All right. Possibly the 29th, but not the 30th. Okay. Coming to you last, Mr. Lindy.
I think if we're talking about a time on the 29th, what time of day would that be again?
29th is after 10. If we do the 29th, we have, but two people can't be there, which would be the,
That for me, would have to be in the afternoon, like a committee of the whole sort of time or later. The one I said, yeah, the one I suggested after 10 was on the 30th.
oh, okay.
Yeah, I could do either
Yeah.
afternoon on the 29th or the afternoon of the 30th.
Okay. All right. Treasurer, you can make either.
Yes, I can make either.
Okay. So we'll have staff kind of double check with all of that, and we'll find something that works on those 2 days or for those 2 days. And so far, we have to still check with Mr. Craig, and we have the specifics of everyone else that's here today. Thank you. Thank you all. That, I wish it weren't necessary, but it apparently is going to be. The last item, besides we get the assignments, we have now the pleasure and privilege and opportunity to make, as we have promised, the appointment of an interim superintendent. And we'll have a motion and a second and then a vote. And I've been informed that Member Moffett was interested in making a motion.
So I make a motion that we have Chief Shauna Murphy as our interim superintendent and specifically Chief Dr. Alicia Smith as our deputy superintendent.
Is there a second for that?
Second.
Second from, okay. Is there discussion about both the interim superintendent appointment and the interim deputy superintendent appointment? Is there any discussion or question? I think Mr. Lindy's talked a little bit about his concerns. Other comments or questions? Member Matt?
I would just like to amend that motion. Am I able to do so at this time or? no?
Oh, yeah, if you amend it, as long as the motion maker and the seconder agrees with it. What do you want me to do?
Okay.
Yeah, they gotta
So
hear it
yes,
first.
I would like to amend the motion for Dr. Alicia Smith to be the interim superintendent and Ms. Shauna Murphy to be the deputy superintendent.
Okay, that's a different motion. So let's vote on this motion first. Comments, discussion? All right, we're
So
gonna
are we
do,
saying, like, is she, that's not a friendly amendment, because I don't accept
no, that's
that.
not a friendly amendment because it's, so we have, it's on the floor for the interim superintendent Murphy and interim deputy superintendent Dr. Smith. Questions, comments? Roll call.
Mr. Lindy,
Abstain.
Ms. Mapp,
No.
Dr. Moffett,
Yes.
Mr. Morosky,
Yes.
Vice President Weinberg.
Yes.
President Bolton.
Yes, Dr. Morrow.
Sure. I don't know.
It passes and we have to enter the firing field, if you will. We have our new interim superintendent and we have our new interim deputy superintendent. And I understand there is a scheduled meeting with the treasurer tomorrow.
That is correct.
All right. First thing, I hope.
Yes.
Well, I don't know if congratulations are in order. I know that the media and the folks that have worked so hard in this district would like to have our interim superintendent and interim deputy superintendent come to the stage and join us. One of the beautiful things in the last several days, folks, is that we have had these two women do interviews with the board. But indeed, together, they met with the treasurer for any number of hours. And then together, they met with the president and the vice president of the board. And what we have here are, won't even say how many combined years of experience we have, but face that way, and these are our new pictures. All right. Thank you very much. No, because it's a new motion. It would be moot. All right, well, looking at our agenda, it is important that we now do the most significant thing we do, which is a motion to adjourn. Do we have
Simons.
appointments, or do we have
Simons.
appointments?
I don't.
I don't think we do. Great.